Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The manhwa starts off with window curtains blowing in the wind, and a man sitting up in bed. He quickly jumps out, asking if he's in the game he's been playing. We jump forward, he says it's been 3 years since he's possessed a game character, but gives us a quick recap. The game is the heroic legend of Arhan. It's about dangerous events that went on in an academy. But due to the seemingly endless amount of incidents, even things such as the end of the world were brought up. But it's okay since the main character is going to take care of everything. Since he's just an NPC named Karan Lok, he's in the village where the beginner quests are. He decides to go find the main character, Park Sihu. While he's trying to find the starting point, he sees a dripped out man saying he wants Sprite. Karan says there isn't Sprite in this world, and the dripped out dude starts as General I'll live this life blah blah, but Karan says he's also not from this world. It jumps to Sihu killing a dragon, and Karan says that the difference between them is that Sihu has the privilege of a stat window, but he's never played the game before. But that's no problem, as Karan can guide him towards optimization. He knows all of the routes and the story perfectly, since he's played so much. It'll be a big advantage to have him held. A dog leaps at Karan while he's talking. Sihu sees this, then quickly kills the dog, with some kind of chain magic. Sihu asks if Karan is okay, but Karan quickly takes care of more dogs. Since he knows all of the game's info, and with Sihu having the player window, they were the perfect duo. At least that's what Karan thought. He truly thought they could stop the end of the world together, but that's for in a bit. Sihu hands him an elixir, and Karan asks where he got it. Then, thanks him, and says he's fine for now, but he is a bit disappointed that their main party is a complete sausage fest. The biggest attraction to the game, besides the fantasy genre, and the action, are all of the heroines and the game's dating simulator features. But Sihu didn't get involved with women, and only used them when necessary. So there is only men in the party. Karan asks why they are all sweaty guys. This is when he should have realized sooner. The Sword Emperor's granddaughter died on the way to the entrance ceremony. The final boss of the first stage, Mariette, went missing. Just all over the original storyline the women were dying from unknown reasons. But more importantly the way Sihu thought, his true personality, Karan should have doubted him just a little bit. It jumps to later, and he's surprised by something. Then explains how Mariette Dunilef is one of the game's heroines, but they weren't able to meet her since she went missing. But he found her staff. He says he followed Sihu since he kept sneaking out at night. And he found an underground chamber full of items, like an inventory. He started finding the missing heroines' items one by one, then he found something worse. We see chains and feet, and a woman inside of a tube. It's none other than Mariette Dunilef. Sihu then appears, sighing, saying shit. He asks Karan why he's here, but Karan instead asks what the hell all of this is. Sihu says she's a demon, and asks if he'd want to waste elder class vampire blood, and that he's been using it efficiently. Then tells him he's drank a lot too. Karan recalls the elixirs he's been drinking, and starts to feel sick. Sihu asks what the problem is, saying he worked hard to capture her, and he had to kidnap her for a whole month. Karan starts to get angry, asking why he did this. Sihu says he did it to efficiently progress with the story, and the route Karan was taking was irritating, always wanting to save people. Using people like this is better. Then he says he's also just better at the game than Karan was. Karan starts to realize he's been played with, then asks him how many people he's killed. Sihu says he's not too sure, then checks saying 3 more and he'll be at 100,000. Karan gets pissed, calling him a monster. Sihu says they are all NPCs, and that Karan's killed too. Karan says he's only killed evil bastards. He grits his teeth, saying if he's obsessed with efficiency then why did he take the Odachi, asking why a mage would take a melee class weapon. And asks why he didn't just use regular elixirs, he can easily get them. So why bother setting up a farm like this? Sihu starts to laugh, and goes to say something, but Karan says he just needed a sandbag for his sociopathic tendencies. Sihu grabs the back of Karan's head, then throws him into the glass, causing him to start bleeding from his head. Sihu says he's driving him insane, after all he's done for him. He shouldn't talk to him like that, all he does is think about Karan. He should be Karan's world, all he did was lecherously stare at women, even though he was beside him. He refuses to hold back anymore. Karan wonders what the hell he is talking about. Then starts to crawl away, breaking the fourth wall. He was fine for the previous 199 chapters, so why is he acting like a yandere now? Why change the genre? Sihu says it's all for their future, Karin says the reason it was only men in the party was intentional then. Sihu says yes, but they are just for looking, so don't mind them. The only one he truly loves after all is Karin. Karin screams, and punches him with the heterosexual right. He starts to run away saying he's never even had a girlfriend. Sihu's magic begins to head towards Karin's feet, wrapping around them. He starts to tie Karin up into, well, we all know the pose. Karin screams this isn't how this should be going. Sihu says he won't let him run, he will trap him here, forever. Because he is mine, in this fake world only Karin is real. Karin says he's lost his damn mind. Sihu says everything will be over soon. Once he finishes this final fight, they'll be together forever. He goes into a portal, and Karin realizes he's in a dimension that Sihu created. A window appears, saying the final stage has started. Karin sighs, saying Sihu's always killed things on his own. He's sure the final boss won't be a problem either. But that's a problem, he wonders what fate awaits him. But a window appears, saying a player has died, challenge failed. Karin is speechless, he wonders how the hell he lost. It jumps back to the original window curtain, and Karin panting in bed, he sits up and looks outside. Saying he's regressed, to the first day he came here. He clenches his fist, and cries, saying he has to kill him. He will have to kill Sihu, the only player in the world. Karin starts to explain how in the Rodian River flooding incident, a dam broke, sweeping an entire village with it, during a monster subjugation. Thousands of water monsters and people drowned, and at such a scene, Sihu was smiling and laughing. Karin couldn't understand why he was smiling so much, but Sihu only saw it as experience. Karin needs to stop him now before he gets strong. Right now he's a rank 5 just like him. All of the factors that strengthen players are centered at Merkaba Academy, and after he left the academy he got hella strong. But right now he isn't a monster, but there's no telling how strong he'll get after entering the academy. While running through the forest, Karin grabs some shrooms, not the trippy kind, and says his only chance to kill Sihu is right now. We see the tutorial quest is to protect people in the carriage, with the security detail. We see 2 members of that detail, and they are saying Sihu is quite skilled. He laughs, thanking them. The carriage driver then tells the guards that it's all fixed. They both start heading back, then hear a gut-wrenching scream. They turn around to see a log being hurled at them. Leon pushes Laura out of the way, and they both narrowly avoid it. Then draw their swords, as the monster in front of them is a rank 2 monster, a werewolf. It lets out another roar. Karin pants asking if it's already started. He says he ran as fast as he could, and wishes he had more time to prepare. Since then he could have saved them. But Laura gets smacked, and instantly plops to the floor. Leon tells Sihu to quickly get on the carriage, but Sihu tells them to go as they'll catch up. A girl leans out, telling him to get on the carriage. But Sihu says he can't abandon Leon. But we see it's too late for him, and Sihu is now standing in front of the werewolf. He has his sword ready, and Karin says he needs to confirm before intervening, whether this is the real Sihu, or if he's the possessed one again. Sihu looks scared, but locks in saying the werewolf is huge. It growls at him, and the girl from before tells him to get down. She attacks the werewolf, but he blocks it. She's surprised it stopped it, then jumps back towards Sihu to create distance. She tells him to step back, and she'll handle it. Karin recognizes her as the second daughter of the Arden family, and the one who possesses the Odachi. Her name is Alicia Arden. Sihu says he was scared, while Karin explains there's an Easter egg where she can die here in the tutorial. He slashes at her, hitting her, and Karin watches. Realizing it's the same Sihu he knows, Alicia asks why he's doing this. Then starts to feel dizzy, but Sihu says he was nervous and slipped. The werewolf roars, and charges at her. She sees this, and does her best to fend off its attacks. Karin says he must want the sword since then he can join Lunia Arden's party. Sihu watches, and sees that she's still fighting well for being poisoned, and she even manages to create distance again. She tries to get herself to calm down, and begins to focus on her technique. She locks in and begins to activate her skill. Her sword begins to glow as the beast gets closer. Sihu realizes she'll kill the werewolf at this rate, but says he can't let that happen. He throws the poison dagger towards her, but she deflects it, canceling her skill. She says it wasn't a mistake after all, but the werewolf takes the chance to go in for the kill. She manages to stab her sword into it. But it's too late, as the beast sinks its fangs into her side. She pants while the dead beast sits atop her, and begins to cry asking Sihu why he did this. He picks her sword up and smiles. He says he'll figure out the special skill later for it, but then realizes killing Alicia will bring him a lot of experience. He sees her already bloody on the ground, and from her perspective all she sees is a demon. But then a bag of powder flies in, hitting him in the face. It makes him begin to cough, and we see his face is covered in it. He asks what it is, and starts yelling saying to come out already. Then horned rats begin to charge. Karin explains how the mushrooms he gathered earlier is the favorite food of the forest monsters, and the powder that coats them is not all over Sihu. So the mobs are going to think he's tasty. Sihu fights back the horned rats, and while he's distracted Karin grabs Alicia, saying he's glad she's alive. He spots a dagger in its mouth, then pulls it out. Sihu curses at him, then asks who the hell he is, while standing behind him. Karin grabs a handful of dirt, saying it must be great to have the Odachi. Sihu recognizes him as Karin Locke. Sihu asks why he's here. Karin wonders if he doesn't have his memories, but smiles saying that's good. He says that he'll cut his hand off holding the sword that way. Sihu looks down, and Karin takes the chance to throw the dirt straight into his face. Sihu starts to cover his eyes, then swings blindly in pure panic. Karin says that Sihu is quick with the sword, but he's definitely clumsy. Karin dodges saying he'll have to push himself, since Sihu is stronger. He slashes at Sihu's throat, but misses. They start some close quarters trades, and he tries to get Sihu to focus on his weapon, and as soon as he gets focused he takes the chance, stabbing Sihu in the shoulder with the poison dagger. Sihu screams, he starts to tear up from the pain. Karin raises his other weapon and brings it straight down to Sihu, but he blocks it with his hand. Karin quickly pushes with his other hand, and it goes straight into Sihu's throat. He thanks Sihu for his past life, saying he'll get stronger thanks to him. But he's got no regrets about this. He pulls the bloody weapon out, saying that he killed the seed of a monster. Then an error appears saying that the player is dead. It begins to calculate the odds of clearing the main scenario. It begins to scan Karin as a backup, seeing his potential and compatibility. Then passes Sihu's experience down to Karin. He begins to be turned into a sub-player. Karin wonders if that means he'll get a stat window. He hears coughing, and turns around to see Alicia huffing and she's running a fever. Karin quickly goes over, asking if she's okay. She says she's not, and that she can't see. He tells her it's good she can speak. He says that she's dizzy and can't smell right. She asks how he knows. Karin recognizes it as the peacock tree frog's poison. Karin says within the tutorial this was hard to create, but if it was a better combination then she'd have died immediately. He says it's a relief that she won't die from the poison, but with the fang stuck in her body she is in danger. He wraps a belt around her to stop the bleeding. He says if she bites her tongue that'll be a problem. He says she needs something to bite. He sees Sihu's arm, and tells her to bite onto it. He says it's going to hurt a lot, so bite as hard as she can. He says he's not sure why he returned back, but now he's killed the player. And the person who died in his past life is alive. She screams from the pain of him removing the fang, and he looks at her saying he's saved her, so that's enough. It jumps to later. He's cooking something. He tells her he's making antidotes, so hang in there. She calls out to him, asking for his name. He tells her she doesn't need to know, and to stop thinking too much and rest up. Once she's awake the antidote will be done. It's better for him to keep himself hidden like this. He starts to plan out the situation, and says that the heroic legend of Arhin is the story about the hero, while solving the incidents and accidents that occur in Merkabah. The player becomes a hero, saving the world. The only reason that the devil like Sihu went along with the story, was because if the final boss wasn't defeated the world would be destroyed. But with the player being dead now, who will fulfill that role? He has no choice but to be the one to do it. He gets annoyed, saying they should at least do it properly. As he doesn't have permission to view his stats or anything, he sighs saying he's a player and cannot use the convenient system at all. It's too hard for him to become the hero without the system, so he's got to use something else. He says that he trained to his limits for 3 years, he's no longer a normal possessor or even an extra. He starts to draw a rune on the floor, it creates a wind shockwave, and he says that as he thought it works. He says this is the only magic he learned in his past life, which are ancient letters that have magical powers. Duty, restraint, oath. These are known as the 3 commandments. These are some of the most powerful laws of this world, which are the source of superhuman strength, and the cause of destruction. He says he'll inscribe all 3 of them onto himself. He starts to draw the first one onto his arm. It is duty. The commandment grants the caster extra powers when honoring a self-imposed oath. But since they are easy to adhere to, you barely earn stats from them. But he'll need to make promises he'll have to follow until the end. He says he shall not turn a blind eye to the misfortunes of the good people. A chain wraps around his heart, and a window says his stats will increase when he sticks to his oath, and failure to do so is a penalty of 10. The second one is restraint. He puts it onto his other arm, and it's that he doesn't perceive spirits. Karin explains how there's tons of spiritual things in the world, and ghosts and spirits exist too. Since astral beings only get involved with mutual recognition, they cannot use their power on people that are unconscious or lack spiritual feeling. Upon breaking this, he'll receive 600% damage. He says the penalty of astral beings not being able to meddle with him has become a protective shield that guards him from all astral beings. And the final commandment, oath. It carries a great risk, which is why neither he nor Sihu used it in his past life. But even Sihu, who had the system, died in the end, so there's no need to worry. The oath with the most weight is none other than him saving the world. The greater the oath, the more power he receives. Now the commandments are complete, they begin to apply to him, and if he fails to comply with them, he will die. It jumps to Alicia waking up, and she's in a bed. A nurse approaches asking how she's doing. Alicia asks where she is, and the nurse says she's in the Merkaba emergency hospital. Alicia asks where the person who brought her is. The nurse says they just left. Alicia looks around, and sees a bag with her stuff, and Karin's belt. She sees there's still blood on it. She calls to the nurse, then asks if there's anywhere that sells honey bomb candy. The nurse says she can only eat stew. And now it's time for the entrance ceremony. Karin is looking for his student ID, then finds a letter. He reads it, and it's his mother saying how proud of him they are, and they hope he becomes a wonderful man, protecting those around him. He sighs, asking when she put this in here. He says Karin was a normal and competent child, but even he has a family. When he first possessed the body, he acted awkward and unfamiliar with them all. But they treated him like normal regardless, and that's how he grew to love his family and this world. That is the difference between himself and Sihu. We see a lot of train carriages, and students gathering around. Then we see a girl with a basket of potatoes. She looks familiar. She sees Karin saying he sure is tall, then asks if he wants a potato. Then it jumps to them inside a train carriage, and she's giving them all a tour. This is none other than Mariette Dunaleff. She's a first-class, second-year academy mage, who everyone treats well. But everyone experiences misfortunes at some point. She is no exception, as she falls into the depths of despair, becoming the first act's final boss. They reach their stop, and she tells them all to take a potato each when they get off. She waves bye to them all, and now Karin is inside the Merkaba Academy. He says the space expansion magic is starting, and they are all isolated off now. Then a loud voice says don't be flustered, and to remain calm. Karin says that's old man Haman's voice, and he talks like a boot camp instructor. The world's history is full of battles against evil. The most effective weapons were superhumans with the ability to use aura and mana. And the place that develops those superhumans is none other than Merkaba. We hear another man speaking, saying hello. He introduces himself as Fermac Damon, and he's in charge of their welcome ceremony. Karin smirks, saying he hasn't seen him in a while. Fermac says they must all be here to either become a knight or a mage. And they must have all received a certificate. They shouldn't let it get to their heads. So this will be a test for their abilities. They all look at a window, and we can see that Karin's ranks are piss low. He says this is straight appalling. Fermac says what they are all seeing is their overall rank. So stand in front of the number that matches your rank, 1 being highest, 6 being lowest. He stands in front of it, saying he's in the bottom 1%. Fermac smiles, saying he wishes them all luck in battle. They all are then teleported. We hear someone say there's a lot of diamonds in the rough, and a glasses girl with big, ahem. Professor quickly says no need to assess the rank 1 and 2 students. Rank 2 has Alicia, a druid named Yule, a mercenary Drawn Warski, a golem sorcerer named Kranal Ludin, and there's a single rank 1. The heavenly Yaksha, Warren. The professor says to let her enroll is strange, wondering what the director is thinking. Another professor says there might be no point in testing the 6th ranks, when the 5th ranks are bad. She says the director said to test all students, asking if he plans to go against his wishes. The man quickly snaps his fingers, and a weapons case lands in front of the students. Karin is then told in 30 seconds, monsters will swarm. He says it's as unfriendly as ever. As the timer goes down, he rummages through the case, saying most students wouldn't be able to pick and just panic grab something, which is most likely a sword. He did that in his past life too. We see dogs are spawned in, and they are 5th rank most called short hounds. Karin says people say it takes 100 days to use a spear, 1,000 for a blade, and 10,000 for a sword. As soon as the timer hits 1, he exhales and throws a spear at the hound, saying the best answer is to choose a spear. A wolf instantly dies. Karin says he's sorry, and the other hounds begin to run at him but die. He says he's too experienced dealing with them. It jumps to later. He said it took 12 seconds. In his past life he couldn't kill the hounds and got eliminated. Now it's different. He'll kill them all until the next rank. But after waiting for 5 minutes, nothing appears. He wonders if it's broken. We see the professor watching everyone's tests, and most of the 5th and 6th ranks are struggling. He says he could kill 5th rank monsters in a minute. He says there's probably no point in looking at the 6th ranks, but spots Karin sitting there yawning. He wonders if the monsters didn't get summoned, so quickly spawns more, saying it's a bug. Karin wonders why they are back. The professor walks away again, calling everyone pathetic, while Karin one-shots them all again. The professor says it's the first passer, and that it only took them 7 minutes and 20 seconds. He says the 3rd ranks just need 2 to 3 minutes, saying the 5th and 6th ranks are ass. But he sees Karin yawning again, and wonders if it's broken. Another man says that Madame Josephine's test magic hasn't made a mistake in 20 years. The professor says it's obvious they aren't being summoned. The man asks if he saw the monsters not being summoned. The professor says no, and the other man barks at him, saying to do it again. Karin sees the hounds respawn, and uses 3 spears, throwing them at the hounds, one-shotting all 3 of them in 7.3 seconds. The professors are dumbfounded, and tell Fermac to check it out. He asks what's going on, and they ask what the fastest 3rd and 4th rank clear is. Fermac says a kid named Jaeger got 3 minutes and 30 seconds, asking why. The professor says it's nothing much, and determines Karin to be a hunter of sorts. So he summons a 4th rank mat boar. It instantly dies in 3.7 seconds. So he moves up to an owl bear, but luckily it doesn't have fall damage to rely on. Karin avoids its swing and stabs it in the chest. The owl bear goes for another attack, and Karin dodges it, using a rune called Kenas, lighting the owl bear ablaze. The professor screams, saying rune magic, and Fermac is quite interested. The owl bear is on fire, but not dead, and Karin says it doesn't seem to be having much effect. But he leaps forward, saying it blocked its vision, so that's good enough. He stabs it in the head, and one of the men realize he isn't a 6th rank, and it's a shame the monster test only goes up to the 3rd rank. He says he was excited to see him with evil spirits, so they summon a 5th rank evil spirit. Karin says something was definitely summoned, but he can't hear or see it since it's a spirit. He says it must be as he expected. He begins to count, and once he reaches a minute he smiles, saying he's confirmed what he needed to. The raises his spear, saying he'd like to give up. For the evil spirit tests he was disqualified, but he set records on the monster tests. He tells the professor good work, and the professor wonders who he is. The students all talk amongst themselves, and they start talking about their ranks. We see Jaeger, who was mentioned earlier, is proud. Karin recognizes him as the kid that picked a fight with Sihu in his past life. But Sihu killed him because he got pissed off. He says that Jaeger may be a bit of a delinquent, but it's common at his age. Some other students mock the 5th ranks, saying they lost to short hounds. We see a student named Lark, who couldn't get over his inferiority complex, and he died by Sihu too. A man clears his throat, then introduces himself as the director Eryu Kasar. He says they've all come here to become stronger, and while some are strong, others have a lot to go. He can't guarantee they'll get what they want, but hopefully they find their own paths here. They are just here to help with the first step. From the 2nd step onward, that's up to the students. That is all, so have a good day. We see some students leaving. While Jaeger is talking, he spots Lark sitting in a corner. Then goes over asking what rank he is. Lark tells him, and Jaeger calls him pathetic for not killing a 5th rank. Karin sees this, and gets close. Jaeger asks who he is, and Karin starts commenting on his tattoos, saying his artist must be talented, saying that it even has a blood type, so he's quite prepared. Jaeger gets happy, saying he knows his stuff, and his mom did it. She specialized in line work, but she did it in the old school style. Karin says that's awesome, and asks to see the other tattoos. Karin says he knows all of this, since in his past life when Jaeger went missing, his mother came here saying his tattoos weren't just for show. But she did it out of worry for her son. Jaeger shows a chariot, saying it represents Merkaba. Karin introduces himself, and so does Jaeger. Then Karin gets Lark to introduce himself too. They all start laughing and having a good time, while Alicia spots them. She says to save someone being bullied like that is awesome. She doesn't recognize him since she couldn't see from the poison, but says he's a good guy. Karin says this is how he left a good impression on Lark, and that his ability is to memorize. Karin smiles, saying he found his free skill book. Alicia says his smile is pretty too, pretty evil I say. Karin explains that most of Merkaba Academy facilities are provided free, student cafeterias are also cheaper than outside, and the dorms are free. The most useful facility is none other than the training rooms. The reason for that is hella simple, since by using the training room even impossible training became possible. For example, fighting with spirit bodies that were invisible to him. Some students see this, and say that usually people practice with spirit bodies in their second semester, and even many second semester students can't beat wind-type spirit bodies. Karin gets smacked, and they laugh saying that's what he gets. Karin asks if it's too much for him. An instructor says it's rare to see a freshman here, and asks Karin why he's fighting spirit bodies. Karin says to train his spear skills. The instructor asks if he's confident, and Karin says he'll do it. He wonders why the instructor is here, asking if something went wrong during the entrance exam. The instructor looks at him, then starts laughing saying that's the spirit, then hands him 10 meal tickets. Then says to find him when he succeeds. Karin sighs, saying he was nervous for no reason, but this is a good sign. He decides to start again, and Mariette is staring at him. She watches as he fights off a flying spirit, it evades a bit of his attacks then headbutts him in the side. He falls to the floor, and sighs while looking gassed out. A towel is dropped onto his head, and Mariette asks if it's hard, and has an empty glass. He says he's exhausted. She summons water into the glass, saying he's worked hard. And if he keeps trying he'll beat it one day, and to try again next time. He thinks to himself he has no next time. Before they had Sihu who had the player stat window, as well as everything from the combination window. But Sihu is gone now, so Karin has to do it all himself. Karin thanks her, saying he doesn't plan to give up. He stands back up, saying he must be the strongest. His first plan is to figure out his limits. It may be excessive, but he must limit test, to see how well he can use his abilities from his past life. He uses a skill called Ominous Serpent Stab, followed by Tiger Wind Swing, and a whole bunch of other abilities that I'll name when he uses them again. He says he had neither a strong body or vast magic power or aura. Information about Sihu in the future was useless in the face of monsters and geniuses. However, to stand side by side with them all, he had to work harder than anyone else. His past 3 years will not betray him when it comes to his spearmanship. He uses a skill called Deep Righteousness. Dashing forward he throws his spear. Mariette wonders if he's giving up after all, but he quickly catches the spear, causing her to realize he shot it, so he could catch it again. He leaps above the flying spirit body, and pierces it using another skill called Slithering Serpent, Calamity Serpent Intent. These names are crazy. We see a massive blue puff of smoke appear, and Mariette says that cliché words such as strong or outstanding don't suit him. Words that could only be summarized as honest appreciation lingered on her tongue. She was mesmerized by what she witnessed, saying that he looks hella awesome while in the air. But he instantly falls to the floor, after this. She asks if he's okay, but he's suffering from complete muscle soreness. Even his spear broke from the attack. The next day we see Mariette telling the students she'll introduce them to the school facilities. Karin is munching, saying he needs to eat to fight properly. Without relying on Sihu's elixirs he has to rely on his commandments, and he doesn't plan to turn a blind eye to Lark's misfortunes. He asks if he wants to go eat with him, and to talk about grimoires. Grimoires are skill books, and that let you get magic or traits just from reading them. Merkaba library is hella big, and passes humanity's knowledge to future generations. But that's all bullshit. Its main purpose is to hide the grimoires. He tells Lark it's like hiding a tree in a forest. Lark says as long as he keeps his promise. Karin says of course, explaining that Lark is a model student. He memorized all sorts of magic and stored them in his spellbook. It doesn't matter how many spells he has, using them all would be difficult. If a magician's level and mana level are low, they cannot produce good results. But with a grimoire it's a different story. Karin throws a book down. Lark tells him to stop playing, but the bookshelf slides, opening a secret path. Lark asks how he found it. Karin ignores him saying to follow him in. While they walk in, Lark says it's spooky in here. Karin says it's time to keep his promise. They shake hands and Lark says he wants him to repel spirits right. Lark asks what he needs to do, but is met with a quick right. Karan says it's time to get started while smiling evilly. He says he came here to help Lark, but he's here to complete a special quest too. If he captures the evil spirits here, he can earn the hidden piece he wants. But there is a problem with that. We see a red spirit named Sabancia Duke. Karan says this quest was impossible to complete. How is he meant to catch a special evil spirit, when he can't catch a normal one? The Duke prepares purple magic and launches them. Karan says most players die from the magic, but of course he can't. Since he cannot be hit, as he doesn't perceive spirits. The Duke's attacks cannot actually hurt him, but there's a problem since he can't see him either. He tells the Duke he's sorry, but he can't see him. Asking if he can just possess Lark's body. Karan says in this world there are factors, this is an element that changes normal humans into demi-humans like vampires or werewolves. One day the Duke awakened as a vampire and killed his servant. Although he worked to restrain his vampire instincts, he failed. And in the end, out of fear of killing his wife and daughter, he evacuated his family and closed the castle. In order to avoid carnage, he used magic to seal himself in a book, which is the grimoire inside this library. Duke hops into Lark's body, and screams while jumping at Karan. Karan asks if he's gone crazy. He says the reason he chose Lark, is because after being possessed by the Duke, the person's physical powers are taken to their max, but Lark is the weakest person in the entirety of the academy, and gets instantly beaten. Karan says he's sorry for Lark, but this is the best choice he has. If he kills Lark now he'll get the highest grade items, like the Duke's cape and armor. Those are items that Sihu used up until the very end. But Karan is different. He asks the Duke if he is curious about his wife and daughter, and what kind of lives they've lived after he was sealed. He told the Duke countless stories, about how his wife died and what an amazing adventurer his daughter became. Along with how she traveled the world, he didn't like how Sihu handled it, so he did it as someone who also loves his family. The Duke begins to cry in Lark's body, then apologizes for charging him earlier. Karan says it's no problem since Lark is weak. Before the Duke ascended they shared a conversation. He obtained some soul dust, and grimoires. One gives regeneration, which is the one that he used. It's a skill Sihu abused, but Karan doesn't know how good it is exactly. Lark wakes up, and Karan tells him what happened. Lark asks if his chin is meant to hurt when a spirit possesses. Karan quickly tells him to shut up, handing him a grimoire. The final reason he chose Lark, is because he wanted to see how sometimes the ones who work hard are rewarded. Due to helping Lark he obtains 80 points. He's surprised, saying you gain 5 stats from leveling once, and this is the equivalent of 16 level ups. He says he didn't get a level notification, which makes him wonder if it's compensating that he cannot gain direct stats. We see the points he's obtained from following along with his oaths. Inside the training room, Mariette is asking who wants potatoes. She starts handing them out to everyone. She spots Karan and approaches him asking if he's going to fight spirit bodies today too. He says yes. She says she believes he can do it and that she'll cheer him on. The other students start to ask her how he could beat a spirit body. They watched him fail yesterday. Mariette says she doesn't think so, and offers a bet of 2 gold coins that he'll succeed. Karan wonders why they are betting, but says whatever, he just needs to focus. He has the stats he earned from helping the Duke ascend, so he can catch it easily. He decides to use the weakest skills first. He uses Ominous Serpent. He says the technique he used before to beat the spirit body was a slithering serpent. It's a difficult technique among the Calamity Serpent intense, so using the weakest one will probably make, but he gets interrupted by the spirit body being one shit. Everyone is surprised, so is he. He says that he's gotten hella strong. Mariette said yesterday it took 3 attacks, but this time it only took 1. He wonders why she's paying so much attention to him, then finds it odd she can track his moves, saying her eyesight is nuts. She hands him a pouch saying it's his share. Thanks to him she earned a bit of gold, so this is his share. She asks if he doesn't want it. He says of course not, who dislikes money. They both start laughing, and he hopes Mariette keeps her hustle up. That night while he eats, he says that he trained his ass off to polish his martial arts. Even now he can barely do up to the 5th step of the 6 total steps of enlightenment. He has a long way to go, but he's not worried. His problem right now is rune magic. His mana pool is really short. He couldn't fix this issue in his past life either, since rune magic takes an incredible amount of mana. If he fixes this, he'll be much stronger than his past life. He hears a woman call out to him. He recognizes her voice. He says no matter how strong he gets, there will be someone he can never beat here, the only female Sihu couldn't beat either. One of the strongest forces in the game. It's none other than Hworin, a Jinshi. He wonders why she's just sitting here, and speaking to him too for that matter. She says that he's been combined, rather she doesn't think he's the owner of his body. He begins to feel cold sweats, wondering if she knows he's possessed the body. He says that she herself has both human and monster souls in her body, and she's also living a contradictory existence. And it's said that she can see those who are in between life and death. It might have been stranger if she didn't notice. She asks what it's like, the feeling of crushing and consuming the original soul. He says dunno. He worried a lot in his past if he and Karin are different people, are Korin's memories not his, and who is he with his memories of Earth? Though it must be different for Hworin, since the original is actually still in her body. Hworin says he isn't the owner of his body, calling him a thief, saying he has no right to the body. He says in the neighborhood next to his hometown, there's someone who turns into a green giant when he gets mad. He says his name is Bruce, asking if she knows him. He laughs saying that it's funny since he has two opposing personalities that hate each other, but that's what makes it fun since they are polar opposites. He says the moral is, whether it's the original soul, or a new one. The both are different, but that's how they coexist. Whether they wanted it or not, they were born into one body, there's no sin in being born. Hworin is stunlocked, then says there are those for whom being born is a sin. He says he understands her agony. Then we learn she's only 3 years old, technically. He walks away, saying see you later. She seems to be thinking about something. Then it jumps to the next day. Karin mentions the south part of the academy. He says there's a reason he's out so early, is for the mission board. The commissions here help you level up to prepare for the main quest. But his goal isn't to take them to level up. He just wanted to test something else, but then he wonders why the hell Alicia is staring at the board so hard. He says he doesn't have much info on Alicia, since she got gutted in his past life. He calls out to her, asking why she's doing missions so early into the semester. She says she needs money. He says that her support fund should be big for being second rank. She says they won't give it to her since her family's income is in the top 10%. He says it was similar to a scholarship in Korea. She also says her parents believe she needs to be independent so they won't give her money either. He says if she needs money immediately, she should do the patrol mission. She says they'll accept 3 people, asking if he will go with her. He says no, he's here for something else. He'll focus on keeping his oath of helping those in need. The first mission is to find Butterfly, a cat. The exp pay is small, but the commandment is his goal after all. If he saves and returns Butterfly, he'll be able to block the owner from the misfortune of losing their pet and falling into depression. He turns it in, and gets 5 points for completing it. He starts to laugh like a maniac, saying the easy missions are going to be the best. Which scares the little girl. Then he sees a guy getting beaten up, and sees it as a free point. Then he finds a ring for a couple. He says there's one mission more important than points this early. He almost forgot about it. We see a house that looks like the KFC guy. Okay, never mind, it is indeed the KFC guy. He's struggling to make a sauce for his chicken. Karin says he knows, and the man turns around to see the Chad saying that he needs to add starch syrup, then the problem will be solved. Karin leaves. The colonel wonders what's with him, asking who the hell would add this to chicken. He tries it, then instantly realizes it was right. He earns 5 points for this. He's surprised since all he did was fulfill his own selfish interests. He says this is the best and laughs. While he's going full psycho, Hworin sees him, and says he's a weirdo. Then Josephine says she left her alone since she didn't leave the city. But she still needs permission to go out. Hworin turns around. And Josephine wonders what's with the sudden change. Hworin recalls Karin saying there's no sin to being born, but then recalls someone else telling her she shouldn't have been born. Even though we can't see her face, she seems happy to be told she isn't a sin. It jumps to the hunting ground. Josephine says the first-year students will be evaluated on their survival tactics at the hunting ground. If you arrive at the cabin at the northern end of the forest, they'll pass. She tells them all to wear your rank armbands, and they can return the armbands at the cabin. Depending on the time it takes for them to arrive with their armbands, they'll receive points, and those points can be exchanged for a prize. Karin doesn't see Hworin around, and says she usually doesn't participate in these anyways. Then we hear Alicia. He asks if she resolved her mission. She says yes. Thanks to him she was able to receive some living expenses. He says that's good, then says he bought this candy for his younger sister, but it's too sweet. We learn it's the honey bomb candy she wanted way earlier. Josephine says it's time to start, and a summoning circle appears in the sky. Karin says he's seen all sorts of magic, but only Josephine can do something like this, saying she's the Great Witch. He teleports to a random area in the forest. He hears people fighting. He explains how it's an important event where even the professors have to do retries. It's a battle royale, where you start at random locations and have to gain points by stealing armbands. He runs, saying he hopes they have fun fighting, and he has no interest in them. The one who is the most dangerous right now is Alicia, with her shoulder strap. He says since Warren isn't here, if he can deal with Alicia it's free points. He says she may not know, but he put a tracking rune in her candy, so he'll be able to meet her again. He laughs like a maniac, screaming her name. It jumps to Josephine, telling Eryu she'll enter the forest too, as it's best to be careful. Then she wonders where Warren is at. Eryu says he didn't send her out, and she decided to participate on her own. We see her chasing behind Karin, and she's pretty close, and Eryu says it seems like she's had a change of heart. It jumps to Alicia sweating, saying why are you acting like this? Since she's been attacked by multiple people, they say the skill gap is unfair. A man leaps at her from behind, and says to please be knocked out, but the dude gets hit by a rock from downtown. As Karin threw it at him, she asks if he saved her. He says so pretty, and she begins to blush. But he means that her blue armband is pretty. She says she trusted him, since he gave her candy. He says that since she's a pure fighting type, she can't use her Vigilant Eyes ability properly. But he can use this to get her armband. She's incomparable to her real genius sister. But Alicia is still among the top 1%. Even though she dealt with so many people earlier, she blocks his attack, and wonders why the hell he is so strong. She recognizes that his close quarter fighting and strategy to poke from the outer range, he's playing her, counterattacking and pressuring her, but she can see gaps, so if she can aim for that, she does exactly that, and thrusts into one of his gaps. But he says her lack of practice due to over-reliance on her talent. He uses land to deflect her attack, not to push it down. Chal, to thrust forward. Alicia sees the attack coming. Karin explains that combining these three basics will create an extreme counter which is none other than Spear and Ten itself. He calls it the 6 steps, block capture plaque. The names are a bit weird, not gonna lie. Alicia gets sent backward, dropping her sword. Then begins to cough profusely. She says that if she didn't block it immediately with aura it would have been dangerous. It's not that he's too strong or fast, his mastery is just on a whole different level. She asks how the hell he is a 5th rank knight, saying it's her total defeat. He takes her armband, saying he'll use it well. We hear more screams, and he wonders what the sound is. Then a giant sword clashes with his spear. He says someone using a sword this heavy could only mean, then gets interrupted by someone saying he didn't expect him to block that. We see Drawn saying he should put the armband down, and calls him a 5th rank. Karin sighs, saying he didn't want to meet Drawn here. Even after defeating countless people he's completely injury-free, which shows he's different from Alicia. But he says there's no helping it. He begins to run, saying there's no point to fight him now. Drawn is confused, and he says that he definitely just ran, and that he wants this armband. Drawn starts to hard pursue him, and Karin asks why Alicia is following him. She says she doesn't want to die. Karin says he doesn't need to fight, he just needs to take the armband with him. Then he sees the cabin, but spots Cranel with a golem, blocking off his path. Cranel says he needs the armband. Alicia says it's unfair he's blocking the exit. Karin sighs, saying he's blocked on both sides. He starts to crack his neck, saying oh well. Alicia sees him to take a stance, and wonders if he's about to fight. Karin says if he can't avoid the fight then he has no choice but to face the both of them. It jumps to later, with Karin knocking on a door, asking if he can choose his prize for first place. A professor says 3 armbands is quite impressive. Karin says that he was just lucky, and it flashbacks to Alicia seeing the fight. She explains how he pierced Drawn's magical sword's cores before it was able to reach its max, and shoved another into the ground so he can't retrieve it with telekinesis. He dodged the swords he couldn't block, and used them to break the golems. He also used Drawn as a human shield to block the golems. While Drawn was busy with the golems, Karin targeted the cores, breaking them. Then he quickly dealt with Cranel. She says it's like someone who has been on the battlefield countless times. His battle IQ is insanely high. She says it's like watching her sister fight. Karin tells them that they lack practice, due to over-reliance on their talent. Alicia starts to feel motivated, saying that she too should try working harder. Drawn says it felt like Karin knew his abilities very well. Cranel also had a similar feeling. Karin said golems are big and powerful, but if it were him he'd have a friend to protect him. Cranel turns into Yamcha, saying he has no friends, L for Cranel. This caused all of them to remember Karin in their own ways. With Karin being finished, the strongest participant left now is the druid Yule. But sadly for her, it's not only participants there, as the greatest mage in the academy is present right now, none other than Mariette. She sends a giant aqua ball towards Yule, which is an unfortunate matchup for her. This is how the hunting ground practice was meant to begin, at least that's what Karin believed. We see Horn appear behind Mariette, and Mariette asks for her name. Mariette says that it looks like she's looking for someone, seeing a lot of Karin lookalikes. Warren dashes past her, but Mariette stops her with an ice wall. She says she can ignore her since she's not a participant, but she can't do the same. Warren says that's annoying. It jumps back to Karin, who has earned 117 points, and he starts to look at the prizes, saying that the shark bear's bile is rare. But he knows what he wants, as he takes the mandrake seeds. Then they ask him what he'll do with the remaining points. He says he'll take some earmuffs and plant supplements. He heads out saying that it was a good haul. He says it's never worked out this well in the game. It's also his first time seeing Jaeger and Lark finish too. Karin says it seems like they work well together. Jaeger says they are gonna train more. Karin suggests they help Cranel find his golem Gore. Cranel is surprised, and Karin says at times like this he should just say thanks, and accept the help. Karin sighs, saying he worked a lot in his past life with Cranel, and he's a huge asset, and things are ending nicely. They helped Cranel find his core. Alicia is slightly injured, Drawn is out of weapons. Yule is dead maybe. He helps her off the floor, saying Mariette was too much. The forest begins to shake, and animals start to run too. Yule says to run away Mariette. Karin asks what she means. Karin is confused since for a talent like Mariette, this area is a playground to her, but we see her gassed out. Saying she needs to analyze, she looks up to see Horn leaping toward her. She shoots out icicles towards her. They break while on Horn's body. Mariette says she needs a higher tier magic. While she promised the professors she wouldn't use advanced magic, she's been using it this entire time, but it's still futile in the presence of Horn. She gets kicked, causing her to go flying. Horn walks toward her, and Mariette starts to tremble, saying don't come any closer, as she realizes that Horn is closer to a natural disaster than a human. Out of sheer panic, Mariette raises her hand for another spell, yelling to get away. Then we hear Josephine tell Horn to stop, and she asks Mariette if she is okay. Mariette starts to say that she's fine, but falls unconscious. Josephine sees this. Karin says there were some unexpected results from practice. One of them is that he, a 5th rank student, got the highest points. And the first year ace Horn, and the second year ace Mariette battled. Karin says he's worried that she'll awaken as the boss earlier than schedule, but says it should be fine. He says there should be 3 weeks until she awakens. So he should prepare first. He heads to the forest outskirts, and looks around saying he came to meet someone here. He tilts his head back, and starts putting eye drops in. Then he throws something, saying he tripped, and wonders what he should do. It's the mandrake seed, and he says it's his mother's precious gift. A voice then asks why he's crying. Karin explains in the game this is a one-time use Easter egg. It's a Taoist hermit. It's some folklore about a man who drops his axe, and a hermit asks if it's gold or silver. The Easter egg was the same way, and some user tested every single item in the game, and that's how this specific combo was found. The hermit asks if the gold or silver seeds were his, and Karin says no to both of them. The hermit then holds another seed, saying this must be his then. Karin's eye drops start putting in a lot of work, and he says yes. The hermit says due to not showing temptation for the gold or silver seeds, he'll give him all 3 in return. Then he starts to fall asleep in the bath. Karin starts to laugh, saying items can be duped. He says the normal seeds improve mana, but the other 2 have special effects. In his past life, Sihu ate the gold, and he ate the silver. But now they are both his, and he says the reason Mariette turns into a vampire is due to a mission in 3 weeks. With the Fog City's murderous vampire, John Doe. This is part of why he showed his strength, or else in the future they'd not work with him. In a week they'll all recover, and he can suggest making a party. Simple version is in 3 weeks Mariette will turn into a vampire. We see her friend waking up beside her. She quickly starts to ask how she is, saying she was worried about her. Mariette says nothing, and Karin keeps saying that if he can form the party he can save Mariette from misfortune. He'll train Alicia, employ Dran, somehow convince Yule and get close to Kranel. He says this will be easy, as long as there aren't any unexpected variables. Of course he jinxes himself, as Mariette sees her friend as a blood bag and goes to bite her throat, saying she's thirsty. It jumps to Warren saying this is boring, and Josephine sighing, saying she shouldn't have sent her, and she should go self-reflect. Warren debates ditching, but then gets jump-scared by Karin. He introduces himself, asking her to open the window. He says he knows it's random, but he didn't want to come empty-handed so he brought her cake. She says coming inside is against school rules. He tells her he's in the tree, and laughs saying Josephine isn't here anyway. He wonders if she's banned from going outside for a bit. He says he understands why Josephine does it, but that he doesn't agree with it. Warren says that she just hasn't come by in 4 days. Karin asks if she hasn't come by once, but he falls from the tree. Karin says that he'll be back later with food. He starts to haul cheeks, saying that there's no way she'd leave Warren alone, and there must be something going on. At the same time he sees Dinah and Fermac looking for her too. He heads to Mariette's room, and the security guard denies his entry. Karin starts to bribe Khan with food, saying that Josephine asked him to give it to him. Karin says he can't visit Mariette, and her roommate Isabel is missing too. And it's weird there's a guard here at the sick bay. We see a rune on the food and Kron's tummy starts to ache. Karin asks what's wrong, and Kron asks him to guard the door for him. He's got the Hershey squirts. Karin sighs, saying he hopes he's wrong. He lifts the blanket looking for Mariette, and instead finds Isabel laying in the bed. Then he spots the fang bites eye in her neck, and he realizes Mariette has awakened as a vampire. He face palms saying this is 3 weeks earlier than what was meant to happen. He explains how the boss fight has 4 stages. The first stage is when you deal with a monster wave, second is that you hold her back with magic circles then damage dump to next phase. The next stage is she summons blood monsters you need to fight, and then the final stage, he doesn't say what happens, but says it's crucial. He says even with the other first years, getting to stage 3 would be easy. But Alicia is injured, he broke Dran's weapons, and he broke Kranel's golem. He starts to panic, saying they are screwed, and says this usually happens after the Fog City's murderous vampire encounter. In his past life they quickly waited outside the dorms and stopped her, but Sihu let her flee. But now he can't do that, since he's made some of the other first years actually useless. He thought about Warren, but she's too unpredictable. He quickly runs to the training room, and tells Dran about the mission. Dran goes to tell him no, but Karin tells him he'll give gold. Then tries to sweeten it by adding some soul dust, but Dran is already locked in, and joins the party. Karin then goes to the library, and Yule is asking how he knows these things, and he tells her if she helps him, he'll teach her the alphabet, just some runes. She asks what she needs to do, and joins the party. It then cuts to him talking to Jaeger and Lark, and he tells them about the situation. He wonders if it's too much for them to handle. But they both are hella interested. Karin is glad. Now they've got the minimum conditions to clear the first part, this is the best they can do right now. He recalls Sihu talking about how Mariette hid in the forest for a month, and says there's only one forest here in the academy. He goes to the hunting ground area, and the other party members ask him how he's going to find her. He says that'd take too long, since they have Yule. He asks her. She wonders how he knows so much about her, but goes along with it. She taps her spear to the ground, asking the spirits to guide them to her. Lark and Jaeger are surprised by the spirits, but of course Karin can't see spirits. He asks if they found her. The other members stare at him, and he wonders why they are staring. They quickly say behind him, and he blocks an attack. He cuts a monster in half, wondering why they are suddenly coming out. Dran then tells him there are way more on their way. Jaeger asks if Mariette became a monster. He says no. Lark begins to use his grimoire, and Jaeger gets ready to fight them too. Karin tells him not to charge the front, or else they'll surround him. He orders him to step back, then gets Lark to cover. He swaps positions with Jaeger and charges in, saying they should all know their roles. Dran is surprised by how well he's handling the situation, saying that he's closer to a commander, and wonders how he's a 5th rank knight. Jaeger asks where Mariette is, saying there's only monsters. Yule says she's not sure either. They start to wonder if they are being controlled by Mariette. Karin quickly says that isn't the case, as she won't be able to control them so easily. Even if she were, she'd not let them rampage like this. Dran says if she isn't doing it, then why are they all attacking them? Karin says that monsters attack according to their habitats, so if something came into their habitat they couldn't handle. This would explain that. Which would mean they need to run from none other than Mariette. He orders Yule and Lark to the back, and tells Drawn and Jaeger to step back too in support. Since he'll be taking the front, due to his commandment, he gets a stat bonus. He grips his spear, and he and the rest prepare to fight off Mariette. We see Mariette is crying and grunting. Yule sees this, and Drawn says it won't change anything. Since they need to subjugate her, he sends her sword at her, but is surprised to see that it gets blocked by an orb. Lark recognizes it as a familiar born from vampire blood. Karin says not to worry, the orb was just recently born, and if they keep Mariette busy the orb won't receive enough blood. Drawn says that a mage who has great defense is a threat. Karin says that's fine. Mariette starts to scream and launches an attack at them. Karin calls out to Yule to block it, and she puts her hand onto the ground, saying the forest is her territory, summoning a tree wall. Some of the tree begins to get broken, but Yule does her best to keep it up. Jaeger starts to worry if it'll break, but Lark says not to jinx it. Yule says that one attack ate half of her mana, and her mana heart is throbbing. But she has to keep going. Coring starts to make a mark on wood, saying to keep holding for a bit longer, and he'll be able to turn it around. She starts to huff, asking if he can really do it. He says yeah, not to worry. The orb begins to receive more blood from Mariette. He explains the entire boss fight again, but tells us she won't be using her full power until the very end of the boss fight. He says it's the same as his past life. He tells Lark to leave soon, since he's about to run out of mana, and that once Yule joins to run very far. He says until now the number of attacks weren't that powerful, but it's about what happens after. Karin realizes it's about to start. She uses an alchemy magic to explode the blood crystals, causing the rest to panic as the barrier Yule made shatters. Yule starts to chant to cast something, then uses ancient rune magic. Karin says it's working, and although only a pure blood druid could activate it, he drew it. He says that it's similar to rune magic, but it's ancient and you can only get it after clearing Yule's scenario. Drawn and Jaeger are surprised as a giant wicker doll forms from above them. Even Yule is surprised it worked. Karin says it's kind of cheating he helped her, but he had no choice. Karin tells Jaeger that there's an owl bear he left alive from the earlier mobs, and throw it at the wicker man. Karin says he prepped all of this while they fought. Jaeger yeets that puppy at the wicker man. It lands atop its chest then gets absorbed by it. Karin says if you sacrifice something to it, the golem will move until its energy is depleted. He cheers it on, and it throws out some kind of green smoke attack. Karin sees that Yule is clearly struggling to maintain it. He tells her if she doesn't hold it they'll all die. The golem starts to square up with Mariette. She unleashes an attack of bloody spears. Some of them pierce through the wicker man. They start to ask Karin if it'll be okay. He says don't worry, as it's not a living creature. So having holes is fine, at least this is what he thought was the case. But the wicker man gets pierced straight through its chest, and Karin realizes that this is bad. As the wicker man falls over, he realizes his plan won't work as intended, as this is a special difficulty version of Mariette. Yule falls to her knees, and Karin tells her to run since she can't help anymore. She starts to run, and Jaeger asks if they can do it with just the three of them. He tells them she used all of her wide-range attacks, so this means it's time to get in and do damage. They tell him to wait for them. Mariette sends the blood spears to them, but they all manage to deflect it. Drawn sends in one of his blades, and it zigzags straight to the red orb. But he still cannot pierce it. Jaeger comes from the top rope, with his signature helicopter, and smacks the orb. Karin says that's Jaeger's specialty, which returns the damage he's absorbed. Jaeger gets careless, thinking he broke it, but Karin yells saying to lock in, since Mariette's third phase is starting now. She unleashes an attack called Realm of Blood, creating a massive red dome around everyone. Jaeger and Drom's weapons are on the floor, as they are unconscious. Karin stands his ground, but says they are stuck in this realm, as it's a trap from shattering the orb. The orb forcefully took her blood, creating a blood werewolf. Karin sighs saying he didn't expect to be the last one. But it won't matter, since the result is guaranteed. It jumps to seeing a blurry ceiling, and Mariette opening her eyes. She looks over and sees Isabella's neck, and leaps toward it like we've seen. Isabella looked at her in fear, but Mariette continued to drain her blood. Mariette compares her screams to a beautiful piano, and when she finally snaps out of it she realizes what she's done. She saw her blood all over the bed, and felt nothing but disgust with herself. Now she understands that she's hurt Isabella. She started to cry, and before she knew it, she was out in the woods, and that she ran away from it all. But now Karen is here. Back to reality. The werewolf is screaming, then starts to build something up in its throat, launching it at Karen. He smiles and says that a dog shouldn't dare to bite a human. He cuts the dog's attack with a spin, returning it to heaven. But the dog doesn't stop, and suits its own chest to summon more little pups. Karen says he's really got that dog in him. He throws his weapon over them, while sliding under, then grabs back onto it, and throws it, hitting a collateral on the dogs. Karen asks if that's all, saying he expected more, since it started off so strong. This pisses the dog off, and it disappears. Karen realizes that it's moving too fast for him to see, then says he's got something to teach it. He says what's needed in victory isn't 100 steps, and that victory is determined from exploiting weakness with a single step, and that there's no way he'd fall for the same trick twice. He uses another technique from the Calamity Serpent intent, called Poisonous Dragon's Exit. We see on the outside of the realm of blood that it's beginning to crack, and it fades out of existence like a piece of glass breaking. They make it out of the realm, and Karen sees the dog on the floor. It begins to cough, and stretches its hand out trying to fight still. Karen says fighting till the end is admirable, but not to worry as he'll save her, since she's technically the dog's mom. It is now time for the final phase of the boss fight. As soon as the phase starts, she instantly incapacitates one of the party members, which is why it isn't something that can be cleared solo. Normally you'd get others to help you, but he has nobody to help. She bites his neck, and begins to suck his blood. Karen says this is what it's like to be robbed of your life. He clenches his fist, and says he has a skill for this. He uses the regeneration skill he got from the Duke, and clenches his teeth, saying he's just returning that kind smile that she used to have. He puts his hand on her head, saying to drink slowly, or else she'll choke. She starts to cry as she begins to snap out of the trance she's in. Karen says that even the Duke killed his servant instantly after becoming a vampire, and that since it took a month for Sihu to find her before, and all she drank was monster blood. But she still refused to kill people. That's how powerful her willpower is. He thought that the way the game ended her story was too harsh, for someone so kind-hearted. She continuously cries, apologizing to Karen. He smiles up at her, and recalls his master teaching him to respect this world's inhabitants. He laughs to try and cheer Mariette up, and says that he's already walking a different path from Sihu, and he's cleared the first stage's boss, earning 100 points, and some rank ups. It cuts to a prison that Josephine made, and Mariette is happily eating potatoes, saying she's missed them. But then Karen jump scares her, saying good morning. He asks Josephine if he can go in, and she says if he trusts her then sure. He enters the room, which surprises her, making her choke on her food. He tells her to eat slowly, but notices that she's really enjoying them. He says he thought her taste buds would change, but she says that potatoes will always taste good. He gets into her face, which flusters her, then she tells him to get away because she smells like liquid ass. He tells her she bit his neck when he didn't wash either. She eventually cools down, and he says that she doesn't smell. She says that she was scared. He asks what she means. She says that Warren was terrifying. She really thought she was going to die. Karen realizes he's at fault for why Warren was there, and that he changed something in her, which made her go meet Mariette during the practice, and that she didn't hold back, which is what led to the faster awakening. She says that she couldn't do like he did. He didn't give up against the spirit bodies, then finally succeeded. She calls him cool, and he says it was nothing impressive. But he likes happy ending, where the good guys are rewarded. He says that she's a great person, she's nice, she's pretty, so he'd like for her to be happy. This causes her to blush. Then she tells him that she needs to wash up, asking if he can leave. He says alright, then waves saying he'll see her later. She smiles, and thanks him for comforting her, but she struggles internally with her emotions. Karen explains to us all that she's temporarily isolated. But he believes it'll end soon, since Warren, a demi-human, is going to school without issues. So even if people find out Mariette is a demi-human, people shouldn't care. Then we hear Eryu call out to him, and he asks if he can borrow some of Karen's time. He says it's his first time meeting him personally, then asks how he's feeling. Karen says he's fine, but asks what he wants. Eryu says it's about Mariette's punishment. He is surprised since he didn't think that she'd get punished at all, which will not lead to a happy ending. He quickly tells Eryu he can explain it all. Eryu says it's fine, her punishment is already determined. Karen pleads saying to listen to him, and he tries to tell him that she's no harm. But he laughs, saying there is no punishment. He says he doesn't believe she's dangerous, he just wanted to see what Karin would do. Now he has no doubts, and not to worry as her isolation will end, as soon as her mental stability is checked. He says he's a little curious about the details. Karin sighs out of relief. Then says he explains what was okay to be exposed, that Mariette wasn't the monster people believed her to be. Ryu thanks him, saying they'll need to make an official announcement. But now that he's heard the details, he needs to do his job. He bows while thanking Karin, saying he's glad he helped fix the issue they created due to their complacency, and he'll fulfill any request. Karin says how worthy of a chairman, and this is someone who always acknowledged weakness. He recalls his master saying though she's experienced countless failures, he was never a part of those. Which means he can trust Ryu's goodwill. He tells him to raise his head, saying that's his request. It jumps back to Mariette in her bed. She remembers Karin letting her bite him, and how he comforted her. She starts to ask what right she has for apologies, wondering if Isabelle is safe. Due to how much guilt she's feeling, she didn't even bother resisting Josephine's imprisonment magic, and locked herself up under it. When Karin visited, she tried to pretend to be okay, but she is exhausted. She only thinks of herself as a monster, but him saying he wants her to be happy, sent any concern she had flying. She began to cry out of hope, but due to the encouragement he gave her, and how she's constantly thinking about her made her feel another emotion too. While Karin is in class, he overhears students talking about Mariette. Karin says it's been a week since then. There was a bit of chaos due to the bastards who opposed Mariette, but since Warren is enrolled it fell flat. Then he overhears them saying that she's still in isolation. What the hell is Jaeger cooking up? Officially her isolation has finished, but when Mariette returned and went looking for Isabella she didn't find her. So she locked herself up in her room. She thinks that Isabelle should hate her, or be afraid. She said if she were her, she'd be afraid of a friend who took a mic chunk out of her. She starts to feel sad, and realizes she has to leave the academy. She then gets knocks on the door, asking who is there. She opens the door wondering who it'd be at this time, and Isabelle jumps at her, hugging her. She begins to cry, asking if she's okay, and how she's feeling. Mariette asks why she's here, and she asks if she wasn't meant to come. Mariette asks if she isn't afraid of her. Isabelle smiles, saying she saw it all before she passed out. After biting her, she began to cry. She says no matter what, she'll always think of Mariette as a friend. So no matter what happens, she'd like for her to think of her as a friend too. Mariette bursts into tears, thanking her, saying she really thought she'd hate her. Isabelle says that she'd be here sooner, but the hospital didn't let her out, and a junior snuck her out, and points behind her. But she sees that he isn't there. Mariette realizes who it is. We see Karin walking away, and he's happy. Mariette covers her face, saying he helped her again. She starts to feel a whole load of emotions. This is how the first part of the story ended, with a happy ending for everyone. This didn't occur in the game, or his past life. Some things went as planned, others not so much. But he's glad for it all, which proves that there are endings out there that are nothing but good, which helps confirm that there is true hope to there being a true ending. It cuts to later, and Karin is saying his schedule is a mix of class, training, eating, repeat, but he's glad for it, since he needs to get stronger fast, since the next scenario is coming up. We see him practicing his spear techniques. He starts off with the rising serpent skies. Then we hear Mariette saying wow, and she starts clapping saying he's working hard today too. He says he's glad she's back to normal, and she says that she didn't prepare much, but brought him some food. He says this is a lot though. But he was getting hungry, so he'll eat it all. She spots that his hand is bleeding, and begins to drool. He asks her if she's alright, and she turns her head saying no. He asks if there's a difference between a blood pack, and live blood. She says there's a difference in freshness, and his blood was yummy. She tries to cover up what she said. Then says that it's just like eating frozen meat versus fresh meat. He says in that case, it's okay if she were to drink it sometimes. She asks what he means, and he says his blood. She blushes a ton, and starts to panic. He says he can regen anyways, asking if she wants some now. She turns her head, saying he can't say stuff like this. Then holds out an elixir, saying it's good for his body. He quickly chugs the bottle of her blood, and she says it's embarrassing for him to drink it in front of her. He drinks it, and a window appears saying his aura rank has risen, along with the aura amount increasing, and he gains 10 points. He says it didn't taste good, but he feels stronger than he was in his past life. He smiles, saying that was great. Now he can start the second scenario. We see Alicia walking down the street, and he says that she's a descendant of a renowned family, and a lot has changed. After feeling that wall at the practice area, she started to put more effort into training. We see her drooling, as she's got a ton of honey bomb candy. He explains that she is actually hella lazy, her overall attitude is horrible. She smiles happily while shopping, saying she doesn't have to worry about her sister here. She says she should enjoy it, then Karin asks what she's talking about. She quickly panics, and he says that he hasn't seen her in the training room, then asks if she wants to join his party. She wonders why he keeps looking for her, saying that she feels uncomfortable around him, since he exposes how lazy she is. And that his methods are too strict, he only talks about the basics over and over. He quickly tells her that she can earn 2 gold coins. He asks if she wants to go, and she says ye. He tells her they'll leave next week. He also mentions a second mission for today. He smirks, saying that he's just using the fact she needs money. But he isn't sure, but based on his predictions, the scenario might start soon. He says that the mission today was just to follow a specific route and check on problems. The monsters they encountered were nothing but 4th or 5th rank at most, with the rare appearance of mid-level monsters. We hear a man telling Alicia they've handled their side, and she tells him to take the monsters' materials to sell later. Karin says the real reason she's enjoying this is due to the constant praise she's receiving, and she can't get enough of it. Since in her family all they did was compare her with her sister. She brushes it off, and Karin tells her there's an owl bear, but she says she already killed it. The patrol is over, and Karin says it should end peacefully today, but of course that's not how things go in reality. As we see a green firework light up the sky, the man tells Alicia it's a secret method for the guards. She looks sad they can't just go home, and the guards start to hype her up. Karin says he was right, he knew that the nest they found had a werewolf in it. Which was also the monster Alicia fought when she was poisoned, so it got easily defeated this time too. However, they ran into something else too. Alicia is surprised, and recognizes it as a Dullahan, a first-rank monster. She starts to panic, wondering why it's here, then uses her family technique called territory cut, but she sees that the Dullahan is easily avoiding her attacks. It grabs a hold of her, then lifts her into the air. She then starts to yell, asking for Karin to help her, as pride wasn't something she had. The guards tell her he's fighting something else. The Dullahan then launches an attack at her head, and closes her eyes out of fear, but hears a cracking sound. And we see the Dullahan and his mount's heads fly in the air. Alicia falls onto the ground with their corpses, then looks up expecting Karin. But quickly realizes that it isn't him, and rather that it's her sister Lunia Arden who had saved her. Who is giving her a look of disappointment. Lunia is considered the greatest swordsman of their generation. Lunia asks Alicia why she's in such a pitiful state, asking why she didn't back up and analyze the enemy instead of running in. Then says the way she unsheathed her sword was sloppy, asking who she is trying to copy. Alicia quickly apologizes. Lunia tells her enough excuses, and that her actions say enough, and that those same actions endanger the soldiers with her. She taps her shoulders, making her straighten them. Saying that ardent swordsmen must always be confident, then she calls out to Karin. And he wonders if he got caught just trying to look busy. She introduces herself to him, and he bows and introduces himself too as Alicia's friend. She says friend like she isn't buying it, and he says he knows what she wants to say, but he can't reveal his spearmanship. Since there are only 2 others who use the same spearmanship as him, and he doesn't want to show he's connected. Lunia walks away saying if he doesn't want to talk about it, then it's fine. Then Arden's 5 swords appear. Jenny asks if they should chase the fleeing monsters. Lunia says there's no need, and they should head back, and tells Alicia she needs to come too. Karin explains how swordsmen tend to enjoy traveling in groups. They follow their leaders, considering themselves as a sect. Blah blah blah, you guys get the idea. At the Arden studio in Merkaba, we hear Lunia ask for a light, as she is the instructor for the Arden style at Merkaba Academy. Alicia bows her head, and greets her. The other disciples wonder why the hell even Alicia is kneeling. Lunia starts to read out the missions that Alicia has done, and asks what the hell the cafe helper mission was. Alicia says that she wore a uniform, handing out advertisements. Lunia asks if she did it for a friend, and Alicia says no. That she just thought that the uniform was pretty. Lunia is speechless, then exhales her smoke saying that she's pathetic. Asking if she is trying to sully the name of Arden family. Saying that she's only done missions to fight low-rank monsters, she starts to affect Alicia's mental state, and it makes her recall her grandfather's words. She starts to feel a ton of pressure. It jumps to a carriage. Jenny and Lena say that Alicia looked healthy. Lunia doesn't care, then asks if anyone knew who the boy with her was. They tell her that he's only a 5th rank knight. She says no way, asking if the Academy's rank test is unreliable. She could tell that his gaze was on Alicia from the start to the end. The monsters weren't even on his mind, which shows that he has hella experience. Also that his spearmanship at a glance looked simple, but she could tell how developed it truly was. She smiles, thinking about her plan, saying she has a request from the Academy, so she'll be able to see Karan again. Who it jumps back to, with a ton of food that Mariette has made for him. He starts to eat it and bows his head to her. He says this is just way too damn good. She says next time she'll bring beef. He grabs her hand, and starts to riz her up. She gets flustered, saying she'll make sure to bring oxtail next time, then starts to talk about how big and mature his hands are. Isabel calls out to her, and she nervously runs over asking if she ate, and changes the subject when Isabel asks what she was doing. Karan watches while munching, and says he couldn't date in his past life because Sihu cock blocked him at any chance he had. But anyways, his relationships this time are very different. Yule would often stop by and bring him mushrooms from the forest, and he'd teach her the OM alphabet. He also hangs out with Drawn sometimes, but it's closer to a colleague. And in class he hangs out with Jaeger and Lark. They scream and he turns around to see Horn talking about food and a promise. He sighs and says a promise is a promise, and we learn it was a month ago he was hanging out her window. Jaeger and Lark run off, and it cuts to some kind of inn, with Karan saying Horn is like a cat, as she is just gobbling down fish. He tells her she needs to eat respectfully, and puts it over rice, handing it to her. He says instead of just eating it whole, to respect it like this. Horn happy. She starts to munch, and he tells her to eat slowly. Karan says the second scenario will be starting soon. It jumps to Jaeger saying he didn't study at all, as midterms are coming up now. Lark says he warned him to study, then they ask Karan if he studied. He says he doesn't need to, and that he's different from them so he'll easily get rank 1. The exam starts. Karan looks at his paper and his mind goes entirely blank, since he doesn't have any idea what the hell he just read. Jaeger wakes up asking if the exam is over, and they both look at Karan who says that knights only need to know how to write their name. He never studied in his past life, and he just learned martial arts. He has no idea about the knowledge of this world. He crumples the paper up saying it's just one portion of the midterms. It jumps to a giant arena, which is the festival conference hall. Karan says that this is one of the faculty exams, which helps those who are smooth-brained, and that 15 students per team need to face an instructor, and since he's 5th rank they'll get a weak instructor. He says he's sorry they'll be used for free score. Then the other students start to panic really bad, and he wonders who it is. He hears a familiar voice, then sees Lunia saying that they meet again, and he realizes he's screwed. Wondering why she is here, the announcer for the test says they've invited the renowned Arden family for the test, and that all of the 5 swords are here. They all say they should take it easy, but to be careful of Drawn. The students start to charge in, while Drawn realizes the odds of winning are low. The 5 swords use a sword formation, and all swing in unison towards the students. Some of them get sent flying, and it wipes out most of them instantly. Drawn of course stands in the middle like the Chad he is, and starts to cook up a plan to win. He uses his swords to clear the air, and Milia leaps at him from behind. He blocks her attack. Alicia calls out to him saying not to be distracted, but Jenny quickly engages with her saying she's her opponent. Jenny seeps her leg, saying that her posture is too unstable. Then stabs toward her head, but Alicia rolls away. Some old-looking students start pogging out. The other 5 sword members each start taking out the remaining students very quickly. But Alicia and Drawn are still standing, and ready to fight. Drawn sends out his swords. He begins to overwhelm Milia with his 5 swords, but Alicia is getting scolded by Jenny, as they clash swords. Jenny says she shouldn't even dream about graduating. She's better off dropping out and training at the main house. Alicia pushes her back, saying she refuses. She tries to focus to see the territory, but gets smacked as Jenny says she needs to stay focused. She sighs, saying that she's got a long way to go. Lunia was meant to be where Jenny is, which makes Karan wonder why she is on his side. Lunia readies her blade, saying that they should think of this as an experience in a great special rank war. The students wonder what that means, and Karan kindly explains to us that it's an enemy that can take on a whole army by itself. A disaster that even dozens of guardians wouldn't be able to win against. He says stories like this would be dismissed by others as exaggerations. But when it comes to Lunia, this is a different story, because she is someone who can go head to head with monsters like that. She slashes, sending marks across the entire arena. It shatters the entire ground they are standing on, and Karin watches as students from all over get sent flying away. Jaeger says that almost killed him, and that she's overdoing this. Asking why she's fighting students so seriously, he then asks what he's holding on to, and we see he's carrying Lark. While he talks, he gets hit mid-convo, knocking him away. Lunia says that they are all too weak to get any guidance from her, and tells Karin to come out, as they are the only ones left. He asks if he can surrender, and she says if he wants the lowest score then sure. But that he won't do that since he'd not want to lose the opportunity to fight someone like her. He smirks, saying you can tell she's Lunia from a mile away. He explains in his past life they were comrades, and while his master taught him spear techniques. Lunia taught him practical combat techniques, but she's a wall he has to overcome at some point in life, if he wants to take Sihu's spot. She charges back and saying great. He blocks her attack, and they continue to exchange blow for blow while shifting around the arena. He thrusts at her, but she dodges, following up with a counter-attack that he blocks. This continues, while the students are confused. Asking how a 5th rank knight is actually holding his own against Lunia Arden, we see Karin gasping and he's gassed out. She says that's quite sad. She begins to sheath her sword, and he realizes that she isn't stopping, but merely activating territory cut. She says she'd like to see him counter this, and to show something befitting with his spearmanship. Ripples begin to pulse out from her technique. The students all say this is too dangerous, and the instructors say she's trying to kill him, and to stop the test. Ticket Gramp stands up, but it's too late as she's using her territory cut. The world has become stationary, with only Lunia's arm slowly moving through it. Karin says her sword is also in slow motion, and he's pushing his spear straight with all of his power, but it won't move at all like her blade. It shakes a little, and he says he can't move here, and he can only perceive the stillness here. He wonders if it was just a coincidence back with Mariette, and wonder if he can't do this, but says it's his only chance. He determines himself to move one step. It doesn't have to be perfect. He pushes his spear forward until it touches her blade. Lunia realizes this, and their attacks collide with one another. The instructors and students are all surprised. Lunia says that it's instinct, not knowledge. The sensation of omnipotence, like being the center of the world. She says in the end, he actually managed to react to the territory. She says to conclude it here, and sheaths her sword, saying he has to use a better spear to match his skills. As she's leaving, she spots Alicia drooling after seeing the territory cut. Lunia says the test wasn't important, and realizes Karin stood his ground solely to show Alicia this sight. Karin sighs, saying correct. She says she'll be staying here for a while, and not to be arrogant and consider interfering, because regardless of what he does, she will crush Alicia herself. Karin grins, saying now she's seen territory it won't go as she's planned. The instructors felt as if it was only fair, and gave Karin full marks for the practical exam. The students are still shell-shocked by the fact he actually fought Lunia. Even the instructors are still yapping about it. Ticket Gramps says that's definitely the boy from the spirit body training. But Fermac has deeper thoughts, and recognizes Karin's spear techniques. It jumps to a few days later. Karin heads to a blacksmith shop, since Lunia mentioned his weapon. And the blacksmith has been given materials, but wonders how Karin knew about his family secrets. Karin says usually the ingredients would have taken him several hundred gold. But now he has the chairman's support, so he can use that to get a hella good spear now. It's a legendary spear from the Shadow Kingdom, named the Silver Knight Spear. It then cuts to a flashback from Alicia, who is terrified. She says she was scared the first time she had a real battle too. She recalls killing a beast, but that the smell of human blood is entirely different. But she has some serious PTSD from when she cut Lunia and saw her blood on her sword. Flashback ends, with her looking at her blade. She sighs, saying she's working again today. Her mission is to capture a werewolf. She's just glad she took it and not the one of chasing the Fog City's murderous vampire. She doesn't like dangerous missions, but she had ulterior motives for doing the werewolf mission. She wonders where her savior is. Keep in mind she was partially blind when Karin saved her. She hears some people talking about a 5th rank knight, and she turns around to see Karin, saying what a coincidence. The other guardians are clearly annoyed by his presence. But Karin doesn't care, since Alicia is here. It's not like they'd say anything with the Sword Emperor's granddaughter here. He then asks her how her eyes are. She says they are fine, and he says that she knows what he means. She asks if her sister told him, and he says somehow. Though she didn't. He tells her that she needs to get serious, or else she won't be able to wield a sword again. She says she'll not worry about the sword at that point. He thinks to himself that he doesn't think she'll be able to. We're then taken to the werewolf nests, but they've already captured the werewolves, and killed the hounds, but the situation quickly turns strange. As they came in hordes, and with a lot of fog, they also have no idea where Karin is, but say not to worry about it. It's a relief that Alicia is doing well though, as she mows them down. More monsters appear, this time as ghosts. Alicia looks around saying this feels man-made. Then a shadowy figure approaches her, it attacks, but she blocks it and we see it's a knight. Alicia asks why they are doing this, saying to back off before she retaliates. Another one rushes her from behind, and hits her while she is caught off guard. They quickly go for a follow-up attack. Alicia zones out, then does a cross-slash cutting the knight into pieces. She snaps out of it, and is confused by what is going on. She starts to smell human blood, going straight into panic. Since she says she just killed someone. While she's bearing with her conscience, one of the knights surprise attack her. But a spear goes through his head, and Karin asks why she's standing there. He tells her they aren't really people. He decapitates him, while she's confused, explaining they are corpses raised by black magic. The main event of the opening act for the second scenario, it's the subjugation of the Fog City's murder. Normally the killer would chase the player's party, but if you choose the capturing werewolf mission, you meet the murderer John Doe. People quickly run over to them, but Alicia is looking up asking what that is. We see a floating figure in a red cloak. She gets in her stance, but he stops her saying to just run. Karin then yeets his spear at it using the pagoda tree mountain, and it pierces the cloak, pinning it to a tree. Alicia says as expected, and another man asks why it's so weak. Karin says obviously not, since it's a boss, and it would be impossible for him to catch him alone. John says that's impressive to destroy his doll, and he'll end things here today. Red fog begins to spread out from the cloak. Karin says it's called Crimson Haze. When the HP of the mage reaches 0 it triggers automatically. Since the doll is squishy it's a form of a trap. This is part of why he's so hard to catch, since he uses them as decoys, and he's assimilated with the fog, so it's hard to locate him. Karin tells the rest to start running or else it'll be dangerous. Alicia asks what he'll do about his spear, saying it looked expensive. But since he has the rune of return on it, it pulls itself out, and flies straight into his hand. They hear screams, and turn around to see one of the dudes tripped. They both turn back around to help and Alicia tells him to grab her hand. While she's doing that, a red hand comes out of the fog, grabbing onto her. Karin says this is annoying, and he tells the dude to get the hell out of the forest now, and takes the dude's rope. He runs back into the fog for Alicia, saying that he didn't think he'd have to do this twice. In his last life he got trapped in here, and fell into critical condition in not even a minute. But he has a regeneration ability now, so he'll last longer. But the problem is Alicia, who doesn't have that. The blood from her wounds begin to be drained, and she starts to swing her sword saying that she needs to get the hands off. But she realizes she has no strength in her cuts. She starts to lose her grip on the hilt, and recalls Linnea calling her a disappointment. He drops the sword, and starts to wonder if she's just truly that weak. She starts to lose consciousness, saying that she wanted to be cool and save someone. She wanted to be someone like her savior. She jolts back up after hearing Karin yelling, and she sees his figure, but recognizes the voice as her savior's, rather than Karin's, and she starts to piece it together, that he's the one who saved her. He grabs onto her, asking if she is alright. She starts to try saying that she can't escape, and to please save her. He puts the robe on her, saying to calm down. He hands her back her sword, saying to focus and be calm. He tells her he'll protect her now from the undead, asking if she knows what she has to do. She breaks down saying she doesn't have the power, she's dizzy and hurting from the fog. He tells her she can do it, and says the talent she possesses is remarkable. He tells her proudly, she just needs to take the first step, just one is enough. The look in her eyes changes from despair to hope. He runs into the army of undead, thanking her in advance. She says that she can't last long here, so how will someone with a lower aura rank do it? She grits her teeth saying that she has no choice but to give it her all, while getting into her stance. She says her grandpa's technique is able to cut anything. She activates the eyes of the boundary, which shows her territories. She starts to feel every single thing inside of the frozen world around her, and she starts to take a step forward. She takes it, causing ripples in the frozen world, and she begins to use the Arden's first sword style. A blue slash is seen cutting through the army, along with the environment around everyone. It's like a juiced out version of Lunia's territory cut, called Domain Severance, and Karin is surprised. Then we hear John Doe as he's asking how she saw him, as she cut him in half, along with almost the entirety of the forest. She is damn OP. In the process she clears out all of the fog, the others run at them asking if they are okay. Then they spot John Doe's corpse, but Karin is speechless while they are yapping. He says he had no idea she would be able to do that. But she looks really excited and proud, saying she did it. They start to talk about if she'll be the next head, since she can use Domain Severance. They start to chant for her, and Karin says that his plans are getting screwed. He wonders why this keeps happening. It jumps to the news, with them all talking about the defeat of the murderer, and how the potential new Sword Emperor, and we see a familiar face mosaiced out saying she's the true genius. Then we see May angrily rip the newspaper up, and tells the rest to get rid of it. Lunia looks deep in thought, drinking her tea. We learn that the family is based on the logic of power, and everyone wonders who will succeed Garand Arden. Domain Severance is the peak realm of martial artists. He's waited for someone to continue his legacy. Lunia practiced day and night, and her calluses are proof of her hardships. But even she couldn't satisfy Garand. However, we see her dueling a young Alicia, and we learn that since Alicia was an illegitimate child she never thought of her as competition. She strikes at Alicia, but she blocks it. Then we see a blue diamond in her eye, and Lunia realizes what it is. Blood begins to spill out. And Alicia is fearful upon seeing Lunia bleeding out on the floor. Lunia is afraid for a different reason. She couldn't even see the attack. Before she realized it she was already cut. It wasn't a matter of speed. It was a matter of domain. Lunia wonders how it's possible that such a lazy child could do this. She says there's no doubt Alicia is taken aback, but now she understands what her grandpa meant when he talked about the twisted nature of those with such talent, and it's like that of a sword demon. Garand appointed Alicia as a candidate for the next head, and the memories she has of treating her sister kindly are merely shadows now. She sips her tea, and May calls out to her. Asking if she is okay, she wonders if they are worried about her. She tells them all to worry, as she wanted her sister to step into domain as well. Since if she could witness her sister doing it one more time, it might guide her to reaching it too. Lunia tells them all to prepare for the sword challenge. It cuts back to the temple, with Karin asking when she'll be recovered. She says in a day or two, then asks if he wants some honey bomb candy. He says she's quite carefree. Then asks how she pulled off Domain Severance, since even if she can see it, doesn't mean she can do it. She blushes, saying it's because he believed in her, and it turns out she just managed to do it. He says she really is a genius. Then we hear Mariette at the door. She enters asking if her junior is okay. She then introduces herself, and Karin asks if she came to visit Alicia. She sees her blushing, and asks if they happen to be close. He asks why she's scary. Then there's a knock on the window, as Warren is asking Karin for food again, like a stray cat. He wonders if Mariette is uncomfortable, since she got bodied by her. Then asks Karin if he's been eating with her, and he realizes that's what made her uncomfortable. He says he'll prepare a meal for her too. She gets happy. Then he realizes that her has a lot of all-stars here, and mentions to Alicia that Lunia will come with the sword challenge soon, asking if she's ready for it. The sword challenge is a tradition to test the head of a family, and it's been a while since it's been used. Alicia breaks down saying that she'll definitely die, and she can't even beat the 5 swords. Karin tells her he has an idea, and she asks what it is. He tells her he has a condition first, and that if he ever suggests training or fighting a monster, she has to agree as she'll be his party member now. She agrees, and both Warren and Mariette watch. Karin starts to make an oath, saying that he vows to help her through this. Then it cuts to May walking down the street, as a sword goes flying past her face. She turns to ask who threw it, and Warren appears saying she's a challenger. May recognizes her, but Warren says that she's in the Alicia studio, and is the knife style master. May is confused, asking what she's doing all of a sudden. She says that she'll get more food if she beats her. Then we see Karin is also fighting Lena. She asks what the hell he is doing. He says that he's from the Alicia studio, and is the spear style master, and is requesting to learn from Lena, while charging at her. Quick recap, we have Karin as the spear master, Warren as the knife master, Drawn as the flying sword master, Mariette as the Gandalf style master, and Alicia herself as the headmaster of the Alicia studio. And each one of them defeated the 5 swords of the Arden's first sword pavilion. Lena asks why he's doing this, and Karin says in order to grow a new dojo they need to raise their fame. So what better way than to take out the 5 swords, as we see spread throughout the news. Karin says that the sword challenge is really just a way to crush competitors, and this is why he said he had a plan, and cooked this up. To turn it into a dojo challenge, which after defeating the 5 swords it's now considered as one. The end goal is having Alicia fight Lunia in a one-on-one. If Alicia wins then Lunia won't be able to touch her. The fee for their studio and hiring drawn was all taken care of by Mariette. Alicia wonders if she'll be able to repay it or not. Lunia confronts her, saying that's quite interesting, and tells her if she wanted to escape she should have ran away as soon as she saw her. It's clear that the dojo challenge wasn't her idea, right? Alicia says she's so sharp it's scary. And Lunia says she knows that it was Karin's idea. Karin then tells her to say her line. Alicia wonders if she'll be able to win, but then formally challenges Lunia to a friendly duel as studio headmasters. Lunia says okay, but to be warned. That she doesn't use practice swords, or non-lethal weapons. They both stand in front of one another, readying their blades. Karin says it's time for the sisters to brawl it out. Mariette watching this says even if she turned into a vampire and gave it her full power, Lunia isn't someone she could beat. She asks Karin if she'll actually win. He tells her he believes in her. Mariette says if he trusts her then so does she. Lunia then throws something at Karin, and he asks if it's a repair fee. Lunia says no, then dashes towards Alicia saying it'll be for reconstruction. Alicia blocks her, but the shockwave destroys the wall behind Karin. And even takes some of his hair off, scratch that it cut the entire top off the building. Alicia grunts, saying she admired her sister when she wanted to learn the sword the most. Her sister was her idol. To her she was like a hero from a fairy tale. We see a small Alicia excited to see her sister, and Lunia telling her she's gotten tall. But of course that was the same day she had slashed her sister. Back to the present, Lunia is preparing her sword, and Alicia recalls Karin's advice on the first attack. She deflects the attack like he told her to. Alicia prepares for the next one, but Lunia hits her forcing her to create distance. Lunia says her footwork is as sloppy as ever, but Alicia is focused on following the next part of Karin's plan. She zigzags in towards Lunia, then dashes behind her. Lunia turns and slices at her. Alicia narrowly dodges it. Then shouts. Lunia is ready for the next blow, but instead Alicia goes for the motorboat technique. Before they fall to the floor Lunia does some breakdance moves and gets back behind Alicia. She gets pissed, then kicks Alicia in the head calling her an idiot. She comes in for an attack, asking if she thought those cheap tricks would work. Alicia blocks her attack, and lets it deflect off of her blade. She says it's all going exactly as Karin said it would. She launches an attack in but of course it's blocked. Lunia says she's countering well against an attack that almost made her kneel, but says it's good it wasn't so easy. But kicks her away, saying she's too inexperienced still. Alicia manages to stay upright, but Lunia doesn't miss the chance and leaps at her. Alicia blocks the attack, and even launches her own, that Lunia matrixes. Lunia attacks again, but Alicia blocks it. Lunia realizes that Alicia is catching up, and that she's seeing the domain too. Lunia smirks, saying of course. She's happy since this is how she wanted Alicia to be. Alicia is clearly gassed out, but sheathes her sword and prepares for her next attack. Lunia still smiling, says she'll respond properly. She readies herself for the final move, as does Alish, both preparing for it. They rush towards each other. Lunia says she'll show her what she's chasing. She recalls Alicia's praises as a child, but sees in front of her that she's grown up now, and that her eyes have shifted towards seeing the domain. Their blades in slow motion swings toward one another. We see a giant slash through the domain, as Alicia has once again used domain severance, slashing through Lunia. The entire arena gets sliced in half, surprising Mariette. She asks Karin if it's finally over, and we see just one shadowy figure remaining, as the winner has been decided, which is none other than Alicia, who has cut Lunia's sword in half. Mariette starts pogging out, but Karin smirks saying that this was the only way for Alicia to have one. So he instructed her to focus on dodging and buying time, since he knew Lunia's pattern from his past life. And that the fight in the domain would break Lunia's sword. Alicia just starts to realize what she's done, and Lunia asks if her performance wasn't good enough, then walks away saying she won't interfere with her any longer. Alicia tells her to wait, but struggles to say what she wants. Lunia realizes that she must be afraid, and turns back to glare at her. Then stretches her hand out and pats Alicia's head since she sees she's scared. Karan explains in his past life he met Linnea way earlier than usual in the storyline, and the whole time Linnea was searching for Alicia's murderer, she couldn't find her. Even 3 years after Alicia died, she still searched. Karan found her at Alicia's grave, and says she's here every year, saying he thought she hated her sister. She says she does, she was always just lazy, annoying and clingy. But other than her, nobody else can resolve her bitterness. He says Linnea just plays cold, and Linnea tells Alicia she's grown a lot. Karan watches the scene and says this is the Linnea he knew. Alicia starts to cry, and we see that the scenario is over. It jumps to the temple, and she's telling Karan she's scared to fight. Yet there's a side to her that enjoys it, he says he knows. She says she's always avoided fighting, but it doesn't feel like her, and that she put on a facade when fighting Linnea. Karan says a lot of people do. She says that now she won the battle, she's an official heir of Arden, Looney and them will be wary of her too. But if she runs then Linnea will truly hate her. He tells her that isn't true, and she asks what he means. He tells her that there might be more distance, and the relationship might become awkward, but relationships aren't something that can be cut so easily. Since at the end of the day they are still sisters, he says she did a great job. And tells her when he was younger he'd get jumped by the neighborhood thugs, but what made it hard wasn't the physical pain, but the anger he held to himself for not fighting back. He tells her she's much stronger than the weak child he was back then, and she should be proud. She calls him weird, she says they are the same age, but he acts much older. He pouts asking if he looks old. She says that he just seems full of experience. Then she thanks him for today, and for back in the forest too. He asks what she means, and she says that he's the one who saved her from the poison a while back. He asks how she knows and she says that she guessed based on his voice and belt. He sighs saying now she knows he can't overlook it. She tells him she's indebted to him and if there's anything he wants to just ask. He tells her he wants to be friends. She's caught off guard, and he asks if she doesn't want to. She says no, but that she's never had a boyfriend before, or rather a friend who is a boy. He says he hopes they'll get along. Blushing she says she's glad to have a friend like him. Karan thinks to himself, that punishment awaits the evil, while a bright future awaits the king-hearted, and we see he was cutting her apple slices into rabbits. It jumps then to Isabel saying she's concerned. She hears someone calling out to Mariette, and then he offers her a blood bag, saying to accept his feeling. She tries her best to tell him no without hurting his feelings, and Isabel is annoyed watching this, saying people keep hitting on her, but her real concern has just arrived. As Karan comes behind Mariette, she turns around hella flushed, and Isabel says that this is her real concern since he's close to Mariette. She stealthily follows Karan and Mariette. And he asks her if she wants some blood. She looks asking if she can. Then they go into the room and lock the door, and Isabel starts to imagine something that isn't remotely close to what's going on. She puts her ear to the door, overhearing Karan mentioning a proposal to Mariette. And it's pretty much just him talking to her about wanting it in where the dojo was, and that it'd be good for her to invest, and profit from. Isabel starts to think that Karan is trying to use Mariette to make money off her. Then it jumps to the training room, and we see Alicia approaching Karan, while Isabel creeps on him from the top rope. Isabel sees Alicia, wondering who she is, but then recognizes her. Karan hands her a card for a restaurant. Isabel says that is a spot renowned as a dating spot, after seducing Mariette now this. Then she slips, and falls. Alicia asks Karan if he heard anything. He says no clue, asking how much money she's made. She asks why, and Isabel overhears him talking about money yet again. At a restaurant the next day, we see him with Warren, and she's pigging out, and he brings up money to her too. Isabel starts to truly believe that he is nothing but a scammer bastard. Then we see a limo, as Karan explains that the Linnea fight cost 100 gold, and he wonders if mages are just that rich. But now Linnea gave him 50 gold for rebuilding. Alicia also earned 110 gold for the John Doe reward. He starts to talk about all the money everyone had saved up. He opens the limo door, saying he's collected 550 gold total, and what he bought with it was a giant plot of land. It's empty plains now, but they'll eventually have a friendly exchange festival with the Brahme Academy here, which will have tons of tourists flooding in, and he'll make a few hundred gold back every 2 weeks. He says he's a possessor and a regressor, and he'll use the info to his advantage to get all of the money in this world. The weird fantasy ends, and we see Aryu talking to Josephine, about how some group's association with the school isn't very good. But it isn't something they can resolve. Josephine says that opportunities should be given to everyone. He says he'll deal with it, and she says that she could have gone instead. He tells her the church isn't a pleasant place for her. He tells her to take care of the academy while he's gone, and she tells him to have a safe trip. Then does the nerd emoji saying let's see. She starts to read through a clipboard, and then sees something about Karin. But she is completely surprised, wondering what he's cooking up. We see it's a request to harvest mandrakes at the west side of the academy. It cuts straight there, and Alicia is asking Karin about it. He asks how much she knows about mandrakes. She says only that they scream when you pluck them. He says yup, and then asks her if she's ready. She says yes, as they both have ear protection on. He says he can't do it himself since he needs to lift it, and she'll need to cut it. He starts to lift it, he tells her he's a bit nervous, and she opens her earmuff to ask what he said. But he lifts it out of the ground, saying let's go. Then we see the accidental front selfie cam. It starts to let out a very loud scream. Karin turns to Alicia saying it's time to cut it now, but he sees that she's starting to foam out since she moved her earmuffs. He says he'll have to do it alone, and screams back at the mandrake. He yeets it into the air, then slices it, giving the cute little guy a nice haircut. Karin gets angry, and starts to bark at Alicia telling her to wake up, saying she's being useless. She asks if he slept too, and he says he's going to kill her. He says he wanted to harvest the silver ones too, but he thinks his ears will burst if he tries it again. Then we hear Mariette, and he and Alicia turn around, to see her there. He says he thought she was busy with facilities today. She says yeah, but it was noisy so she dipped out, and we see she jumped from the 12th floor. She starts to go super yandere mode, asking why they are together. He says that he told her before about the mandrake harvesting. She drops the aura, and runs over asking if they'll harvest the rest too. He says yeah, but they are tired and will do them another time. She says she'll do it for him. He tries to tell her to wait since it'll be hard to cut. She quickly pulls out the silver one and he says it's too late, saying she might die. The mandrake doesn't scream. She says that there are mandrakes at home, and she's harvested 30 this year, and rips the little dude's head off. She says that he's planning to cook them right, and she'll do it for him. Then he asks Alicia to get some food for her to chef up. She says yes and starts running off. Karin then asks what he should do. She says there's nothing to do, as she'll handle it all for him. He says that he's grateful for that. He explains there are two ways to consume a mandrake. One is just eating it like normal. But the most effective way is to make herbal decoction, by adding stuff to a pot and boiling it for 10 hours. If you do that you can make some mandrake herbal tea pretty much. Mariette says they just need to boil it now, then asks what he's doing. He says he was just passing the time. She notices he's drawing runes in the sand. He asks if she can recognize them, but she says she can't read them, but she's seen them. Then asks where he learned them. He looks sad saying his master taught him. Until just a year ago, he learned runes and spears from her, the martial arts and original runes she left behind. He says learning the runes were different since original runes were retrieved and engraved onto the body, and could only be used by one person. One of the final boss's goals was to retrieve and possess this original rune. His master tried to pass them down to Karin, but she died before being able to. Because of the final boss, who we don't learn his name. Mariette asks who his master is, asking if she's a part of the Mage Tower. He says just a regular person. She's someone who does her best. Mariette says he seems affectionate, then asks if he wants potatoes. He says he hasn't eaten yet, and she calls for Diokgu. Which those of you who remember will recognize the dog as the vampire orb. He says she finally bound the orb, and she says it's thanks to him sharing his blood, and says he's cute, right? Karin sees it as a giant dog, and says he guesses. Then says since he's made from half of Karin's blood, it means he's his dad. She blushes saying she didn't think of this, then says as Diokgu's dad he should play with him. He says that he isn't a real dog, asking what she means. Then gets turned into a damn chew toy. It jumps to later. The stew is done, he starts to drink it, and Alicia asks why he's all beaten up. Mariette says because of Diokgu. Due to drinking the mandrake soup his mana increased by 1,300, he says this is good, and they should drink too. He says it's because the effect is only applied once. He says what's left now is the white silver mandrake, which he has to just eat raw. He consumes it, creating an aura core. Which is a vessel for a knight's aura, and you have to train to the extreme to create one, but since he's got one now it'll lead to a double core. He tells them he got an aura core, and they are surprised. Alicia says he should eat the gold one too, but he says not yet. Alicia says it's also good to wait, but that's not the real reason he's doing it. We see Ticket Gramps talking about Karan, saying that his rank needs to be remeasured. The other instructors asks what's the point of re-evaluating a 5th rank. And one of the instructors say they missed out on the midterms. Fermac speaks up saying that he faced off against Lunia for around 3 minutes. They say that makes no sense, and she must have gone easy, saying she wouldn't exert full power in the student's midterm. Ticket Gramps asks what he's yapping at, then asks if the other professors who saw it if they think she went easy on him. Nobody else speaks up to refute it, and a professor says even if she didn't, raising his ranks from this is just not in compliance with the rules. Ticket Gramps says to leave it up to the association then, and it should be enough if they say it's for the condition of a guardian certificate. They say that since it's Haman's idea, why doesn't he take charge of it? I forgot his name, my bad. Haman says this is what he wanted. The professors say since Karan's situation is taken care of, they'll move on. Fermac goes back to saying that the spear technique is definitely no matter how much he thinks about it was of someone else's he knows, so there is definitely a reason for Karan to be remeasured. It jumps to Alicia saying hi to him, and asks to sit with him since they are in the same class today. He asks what's the point of asking if she sat down, but tells her it's Jaeger's spot. She apologizes, but he jumps in front of them, then he gives Karan a death glare. Karan asks why he's glaring at him already. Jaeger says he's seen him with Mariette, the super cute demon girl Warren, and now Alicia too. He cries saying this shit is cooked, and puts his head down onto his desk, saying this is unfair. Fermac enters the room, telling everyone to take their seats saying they'll be starting their group projects today. The students say they hate group projects though. Fermac says he'll explain it to them now. It won't be anything crazy like math, or anything boring. He snaps his finger, and pieces of paper begin to form into one giant painting. He says this will be the topic of their group projects. It's none other than spearmanship. Alicia says it'll be easy for Karan, and he's confused since it was boxing in his past life. Since Fermac is a boxer, and he has a shadow specialty, and has rune magic engraved onto his gauntlets, he smirks saying that Fermac sure is quick-witted, and that this must be Fermac's way of testing him out. Fermac says that they'll all research a specific type of spearmanship, and then they'll demonstrate the different techniques. A student chirps up saying that this favors those who already use spears. Fermac says he'll take it into account in his evaluation, and each group will have 4 members, assigned at random. Karan says that group projects seem like a way to help students cooperate. But in reality, the hardest worker loses the most. He gives an example of a school project he was doing and that he completed his end, but the other students just made excuses. Karan says he experienced it so many times during his 4 years at university, and also here at the academy. But this time it's different, because somehow he got Alicia, Jaeger and Warren. He says Jaeger is good at doing what he's told, Alicia is able to learn things easily. Warren is also hard-working, and he's been having fun watching her studying. He says that with this he won't have to suffer in a group project, and he tells them he's made reservations for the training room. At least that's what Karan thought, but we hear him and Jaeger talking about how the walls shouldn't be able to destroy the walls. But we see that Warren's standing over Alicia, with the room being a complete mess, and that Warren blew a giant hole in the wall from a single punch. Karan says based on Warren's expression, she doesn't know what she did was wrong. They all got kicked out of the training room. At the church on Sunday they are having their first reflection session on the assignment. Karan asks for the others to share their thoughts. Alicia apologizes for yesterday saying that she's not good at controlling her power, then she says that copying Karan's movements make her feel like a true spearman. He asks what Jaeger thinks. He says that he's struggling to figure out how to execute the unique spin Karan does. Karan, as long as they keep practicing it'll get better. Karan then asks Warren what she thinks. She just says to eat while bringing them food. He asks if she's doing it out of communion, or if it's volunteer work. She says it's mandatory, so she's forced to attend. He says he forgot she was training to be a nun, and she says it's not like she wanted to. He says regardless, she should read the scripture, there's stuff to learn from the stories of the saints and saintesses, and that the Protestants often always talk about love herself, and those around her, love and be loved. Alicia says that's a great teaching, and love is important. Then Karan asks if Warren knows why yesterday was a failure. She looks at them, then says they are all too weak. So even if she barely puts strength into her punches they'd break. Karan says that she isn't wrong, but that is a sentiment only the truly strong can express. Warren asks what he means. Then he says he wants to make a bet. If he can make her kneel in 1 minute she'll have to pay for dinner tonight. She says okay, but if she wins she doesn't need a reward since he'll break. They head to the training area. He says they'll start when Jaeger says so, but he and Alicia wonder what's going on. He says alright, telling them to prepare. Karin and Hworin stare at each other. The spar starts and Karin rushes in saying he'll go with his strongest techniques. He uses his Calamity Serpent intent, straight off rip. He says she's blocking it like it's nothing. He says alright, going into his next technique, but his spear breaks on her. She leaps at him. Karin smirks, saying she sure is good at destroying things. She uses her 8 trigram steps, and launches 3 rapid attacks at Karin, but he avoids them all. He asks if it annoys her that she can't connect, and she says that he is annoying, and to try dodging this. Saying if he doesn't he'll die, he says that he'd be in the hospital for at least a month, and says he should dodge. But he will block it instead, and he puts his palms up to block her attack. He says that even though he perfectly blocked it, he feels like his muscles are going to rupture. She is surprised that he didn't dodge, then we see her start to go down, and that he's gotten behind her and kicked her knee down. Jaeger and Alicia ask how the hell he did that. Karin says it looks like she kneeled. Annoyed, she asks to go again, but he says nope. She starts to get angry, saying to do it again. He starts to tease her, saying that he can hear the sound of her trembling, asking if she is angry. Then he laughs like the Joker. A few days later we see him holding a paper, and it's a note from Hworin to say do it without her, since she is sick. But Karin crumbles it up, saying that he'll make sure to get her back. They head to a restaurant and Karin says that she should eat. We see her drooling, and he says if she does drink then she isn't sick anymore. He asks her if she can refuse. She starts to munch saying she's not sick anymore, and Karin laughs saying that's no surprise. Then he asks her if she knows how long chefs work to make one dish. He says it takes a chef 10 years to refine their cooking process. She asks what's the point of this. He says that it took him 3 years to get good enough to make her kneel. And that her favorite fish, and his spearmanship have similarities. From selecting the right ingredient, to the posture he takes. It all begins with the small details. We see his master teaching him, and Hworin doesn't reply. Karin quickly asks if they've made up right. She slams a book into his face, and we learn it's about spearmanship and more details on the techniques. She keeps munching. He pats her head saying she's a cutie for diligently doing her work, and he says they've got enough to present now. The first week of presentations start, and the order of presentations was decided by random, so they'll go in a bit. We see them watching the first group present, and it's a man named Palais leading group 1. He says their topic is the 5-star spearmanship. They all start to demonstrate, and Jaeger says they are quite prepared. Fermac says it wasn't bad, and Palais thanks him. He says from now on he'll fight their formation. He equips his gauntlets, and says if they last 10 seconds he'll give them full marks. He tells them to block, and Palais is confused. Fermac throws his clipboard into the air, and weaves in close to him. Then flips the students onto the floor. Jaeger says he's damn fast, and Karin says he's not holding back. Fermac catches his clipboard, saying the group spearmanship was a good idea, but they lacked practice. It wasn't terrible, and he gives them a B-. They accept it. The next group picked the 9 deadly dragon spearmanship from the north. We see they get run through by Fermac quickly, and they get a C-. Next is group 3, which is Karin's group. Karin says they are showcasing the 8 trigram spearmanship, forms Lan, Na, and Ja. Fermac says to start then. Jaeger demonstrates Lan, which is to deflect. Alicia does Na, which is pushing the weapon down, and Hworin does Ja, which is stabbing the unguarded enemy. Karin is happy by their performance, saying they worked hard. Fermac says incredible, and it was extremely refined. Karin goes to prepare them for the fight portion, but Fermac says he only needs Karin, so the real fight will be just the 2 of them. He asks if there are objections. Karin smirks, saying he wanted this from the start, and there's no issues. Fermac says that he'll be starting now. He charges in with his technique called radio, and goes for a right called jet boost, and Karin looks down at Fermac's feet to see that the right is a feint and he sees Fermac pivot, then blocks a punch from the left. Fermac is surprised, and the other students say he's moving entirely differently from when he fought them a moment ago. But they also notice how his punches keep getting blocked by Karin, then wonder how he's keeping up with him. Fermac says that he's definitely above the level of a student, and decides to pressure him further so he'll show more than just the basics. He punches towards Karin, wanting to see his other spearmanship. But Karin smirks without dodging, and Fermac's punch creates a shockwave. The other students can't see anything, and wonder if Karin is okay. But we see that he stopped his fist just shy of Corin's face. Fermac then waits a second, asking why he didn't bother to dodge. Karin says that it's past, the 10-second timer is over. Fermac realizes he's right, and Karin says he must be suspicious. Up until now he's only used his right arm, to trick him into thinking he was right-handed, but somehow Karin blocked his left. Then Karin calls him his martial nephew. Fermac calls out his group name, and says generally people blindly chase after fancy techniques thinking they are secret arts. Yet the basics are the true secret arts. He goes to say Corin's name, but changes it to group 3. Then gives them an A+. Alicia and Jaeger pog out of their gourds. While they are celebrating, Fermac asks to speak to Karin alone. He tells him not to feel pressured as it's just a casual meeting. He asks Karin if he's truly a 5th rank knight, and Karin says yes. Fermac says he must be aware that his abilities don't align with those of a 5th rank knight. Karin says he's just good. But thinks to himself that since he can't perceive spirits he couldn't get a higher rank in the placement test. Fermac tells him about how the professors met and debated about a rank adjustment. He tells Karin he'll be assigned several missions, this way they can accurately judge his rank. The highest allowed would be him upgrading to a semi-first rank. Karin thinks there'd be no harm in a high rank since he'd be able to get better missions. And it's a right he'd get in his second year if he were a player. He tells Fermac he'll accept the reassessment. Fermac tells him he needs to complete 2 missions involving semi-first rank monsters, and evil spirits, on his own of course. Currently there are 4 semi-first ranks to choose from, and luckily there are 2 monsters and 2 spirits available. Fermac then tells him to choose. It jumps to a forest. With Haman, and Karin says it's quite gloomy out. Haman says when he was young he'd venture into the fog and hunt monsters. Karin says he's down for some adventure stories. Haman says he guess he can tell him about some. Listening to Haman's stories will give him some points. Sadly we don't hear them, instead we get Haman talking about how his first hunt will be the twin-headed ogre. It's slow, but very powerful. Karin says he's surprised it's a semi-first rank, rather than just a first rank. Haman says because it isn't an adult, but the ogre is raising some hounds and hunting dogs. Karin says then a frontal assault is out of the question. Haman says exactly, and they aren't looking for pure strength but everything else as well. At the city's western mountains we see professors there, but none of them are allowed to help Karin. Though they'll do something if it gets dire. Haman asks Karin for an analysis. He says that based on the footprints the ogre and hounds travel together. Haman asks how many hounds. Karin says 3. Haman says there were only 2 sets of footprints, and Karin says that one is pregnant. Haman says he's glad he knew, but to explain more. Karin says that there's evidence of a beast being dragged, but since it wasn't eaten on the spot and the monsters won't have a concept of saving food. It means there's another one who can't move, so they are bringing it food. Haman says well done Sherlock, then asks how he plans to hunt the ogre and the hounds. Karin says he'll separate them from each other. Haman asks how, and Karin says that they'll have a sense for dangerous things. So he'll use humanity's strongest weapon. He plans to use his brain, and unfortunately for them he's an expert at this. Karin says even as humans expand their influence and navigate the world, there are still threats lurking. Such as demonic beings that exist in this world, and the twin-headed ogre is one of them. Like a tyrant, the ogre commands the forest where humans usually avoid. To him, this forest is his kingdom. We see the hounds barking, as the female who was in her nest is nowhere to be found. They start to bark and see a trail leading away from the nest, which means she was taken. The ogre is furious upon learning of this, and shouts along with the wolf's howls, causing the forest to shake. The hounds frantically follow the path, along with the scent of the female. They even began to smell the intruder who took the female. They charge directly towards the female, to find her tied up whimpering. They rubbed noses with her to check if she's safe. As they tried to help her leave, the rope got tighter, and logs fell from the sky to effectively cage them in, but it's a distraction as another log goes straight forward hitting both the female and one of the males. Slamming them into a tree, this causes more traps to be deployed, and the other male realized they weren't tracking anymore. But that it's time to haul cheeks and survive, it spotted a safe area away from the trees. The hound sat and waited, trying to catch his breath. But then sees glowing form below, as there were small rocks all over, each with a rune written onto them. Causing an explosion, now the wolves have been eliminated. And the ogre finally catches up only to bear witness to the scene, of the male burning alive. He grits his teeth, then yells out of anger. Then ropes snap as they had runes on them too, they send out flaming logs towards the ogre. He swings his club. To deflect them, as a trap wasn't enough to damage the tyrant, as he is the ruler of the forest. But the tyrant wasn't aware that the hunt had just begun. The ogre was a natural hunter. His first had as good vision while the second had a great sense of smell. So he could easily track Karin, and it saw all of his footprints, wondering how the hounds lost to someone like him. But despite it looking so easy, on the first day the ogre couldn't find Karin. Even though he chased the blatant tracks, he couldn't find him. He camped, putting his feelings aside, deciding to rest. But instead get ambushed by runes. It would have caught them off guard if one of the heads weren't on alert. The ogre stood up, swinging wildly to deflect the attack. He only got grazed by a few pieces of hail. That's all the attack was meant to do. There were continuous sabotages after that. Right as he was about to fall asleep, the hail would rain down upon him. After experiencing it a few times, he wanted to ignore them, but then fire rocks began to rain down on him, which burned him. But the ogre still kept his hunt up, but the traces of Karin became thinner and thinner. 3 days passed like this. The ogre began to realize that he was being hunted. All that was left was fury and grief. We hear Karin saying hi, and the source of the ogre's anger has finally appeared. Karin yawns, saying time to end this. The ogre begins to maul. Screaming, he charges at Karin. But Karin is ready. He charges back, then leaps off the ground, twirling his spear in the air. The ogre was ready to play baseball with Karin, but Karin readies his spear and throws it at the ogre. It is a direct hit to the chest, but blows a giant hole through the ogre's body. The ogre screams in pain, and Karin gets close using a palm technique, hitting it again, which ripples through the ogre's chest, lifting it off the floor. The ogre's life leaves its eyes, and it falls to the floor. Karin says after filling his aura core he didn't even have to use it, and yawns again. He wonders if Mariette is doing okay. It cuts to 3 days ago, and he's asking Mariette how much she trusts him. She says that she'll trust him unconditionally. He says if she trusts him, how far is she willing to go with him? She bursts her blood bag out of surprise. She starts to flail her arms, saying until the very end. He says he has a plan, and he needs her for it. He says starting tomorrow, her and Alicia. But her face changes. She asks why there's a girl in their plan. Then we see her bloody clothing in a basket, and the water of a shower running. Mariette says that it's bigger trouble than she expected. She may seem smooth-brained, but she isn't an idiot. She knew that Karin was always one step ahead, planning things before they even happened. Whether it was him saving her, or helping Alicia. She wonders how far he knew ahead, but due to falling in love she's blinded by it, and decided to listen to him again. The reason mages want to become professors at Merkaba isn't just because the library is good, but because the research building at the west end of the academy. There's an ingredient there that only mages can dream of. Such as special monsters that cannot be killed, which leads to them being sealed. We see Diana talking to Fermac. She says this boar ate a whole iron mine, and the origin runes inside of it. Fermac says that this research is based on the boar's alpha characteristics. Diana says yeah, and she wants to write a thesis on the influence of the special demon tribe, on low-rank entities and the unique alpha energy. Fermac asks if she wants him to put a rune on the boar. She says yes and says it's a relief to have him here, since rune mages are rare. Fermac says that's what happens with dead languages, and they are hard to use in real battles. Then we hear Mariette say unless you have a lot of mana like her. Fermac gets confused, and Diana says that she offered to help, and that she happens to be a special vampire. Diana asks Mariette if it's okay for her to say that, and Mariette says that's fine. Since it's not like she's wrong with her being a vampire, the first act's boss Mariette is now in a room with the second act's boss, the king of the iron mine. It cuts to Luigi's mansion. Karin says it's a simple mission you picked during the second semester, where you must defeat the first-rank evil spirit in the house, and have to navigate through attacks from random household items. The difficulty level is hella high compared to how simple the name is. Karin normally can't see spirits, but this is an exception. Just like how Duke possessed Lark, there's a being possessing the house. He walks towards the house, then begins to give us a walkthrough, and says to jump here and attack, disconnect the route, then charge in with your spear, breaking the terrace, shattering the glass in front of you. Slide underneath them, and head to the door. Then he turns into pixel art, still explaining the entire process, while the professors are eating this shit up. Karin says now there will be no more furniture coming for you, then you just put some runes down, and light the entire house on fire. Remember, cool guys don't look at explosions. Karin's also a man of culture, so he knows, and he says that was 30 seconds well spent. Haman is shocked, asking how the hell he did all of that, and they wonder what he was mumbling the entire time. Karan laughs, saying it was a streamer strategy. Haman puts his hand on his shoulder, congratulating him, saying that he is now promoted to a semi-first rank, then tells him there's a port city nearby called Sar, and he knows a good restaurant there they can go eat. Karan asks if it's a raw fish place. Then they start walking, talking about how much they enjoy raw fish. Karan looks behind, and sees Deokgu watching from afar. We then get some world lore, about how 88 years ago in the Dingle, what a name. Peninsula, it was a cold land but harbored an abundant amount of natural resources. Some people called it the Iron Mountain. The miners who pioneered the polar regions came to find iron and gold, but found something else. They found giant boar eating iron ore. This was the first time people saw the king of the Iron Mountain. Gonna call him Piggy. We hear Alicia asking why she slept late like this, and that she can't be late when Karan asked her a favor. It jumps to a few days ago, at the first floor of the testing facilities. Alicia sees Mariette cooking up something. Alicia asks if it's important. Mariette says not really. Alicia asks why she called her here, and Mariette says that Karan asked her to tell Alicia the plan. Alicia is surprised, then Mariette asks if she wants to drink this before they start. Alicia drinks it. Since it's technically an elixir, Mariette tells her it's hot, so take her time to make sure it's safe. Alicia starts to make funny sounds, and Mariette panics, asking if she's okay. Alicia says that it's gas. Mariette starts to check on her clipboard. Then Alicia asks her what Karan told her to tell her. Mariette says that Karan wants her to know what'll happen soon. We don't get to hear, but Alicia runs through the crowd saying it's about Piggy. She doesn't know why Karan called for her, but she needs to go quickly. At the basement of the training facility, Diana asks Mariette if she knows what distinguishes monsters and demons, then tells her that it's the power of domination. Fermac wonders if she called her here, and Diana explains how some demons emit a special energy, and that's what makes them alpha entities. And unlike normal monsters, they are stronger and give commands. These alpha entities can control their kin, but the domination ability doesn't work on different species, but for special demons it works. Mariette says that means special demons can control those weaker, and Diana says that's correct. Mariette recalled when she was running away and that she'd control the owl bears to sacrifice themselves to her. But rather than controlling their minds, she used fear. Diana says that's based on her species, and there are 3 types of demons: monsters, evil spirits, and demi-humans. But the alpha trait is different too. Mariette asks if she'd be able to control other demi-humans. Diana says they need to research more about it, but she doesn't think so. Diana says the theory talk is over, and it's time to get into the real deal. She asks for her assistants to bring in some small boars. Diana says that if she can freely use her alpha trait, she should be able to control these lil pigs. Mariette thinks about how she's hella interested in this, since it means that humanity might be able to make demons less dangerous. Diana then asks if she made her elixir taste better. Mariette says yes, thanks to her. Then she says that she should try to control the boar. She stares into its eyes, telling the boar to come out. The pig growls, then we see them stepping out of their cages. She tells them all to stop, then says she'll try this and tells them to lay down, but they start to do interpretive dances. She asks Diana why they aren't listening. She says it must be the limit of communication between monster and demi-human. She says they should check if Mariette can control them after Piggy has, asking Fermac to release the king's seal. He begins to use the rune of banishment, only removing the first steel from Piggy, causing him to growl, which controls the small boars to turn toward Mariette. Diana says they need to strengthen the other seals. The boars start to growl too and charge at Mariette. She tries to tell them to stop. But since it's useless, she slaps the hell out of one. Diana wonders if it's because they are just boars, saying they are losing control too easily. Mariette says she can still just overpower them. Then an explosion is seen as the monster in cage A107. Diana starts to yell no. We see a snake slithering, then it's revealed we were catfished. It's a manticore. Mariette casts blood spear toward the manticore, but it easily bobs and weaves, avoiding the spears. She goes to get Deokgu to step in, but Fermac says don't trip, then decks the manticore, causing its whole body to spin. He takes the chance to follow up with a left straight, sending the manticore flying. He tells Diana that something is strange, as all of the monsters begin to go wild. An assistant tells them that the monsters are beginning to smash their cages, they need to leave now. Diana starts to activate the sealing magic, saying she needs to seal Piggy now. She says they are losing some research funds, but their priority is safety. Another 2 more assistants say that the magic circles won't activate. Diana realizes someone broke the magic circles, then we see chains breaking. Diana is stun-locked, and realizes what this means. Since Piggy has finally freed himself, it jumps to the port city Sar, and we hear Karin and Haman talking about their meal. Karin says the reason he's enjoying such a feast is because Haman took him here to celebrate his promotion. Karin says they should get some alcohol, and Haman says he's a student. Karin says that he's legally a minor, but says that the sadness of not being able to have beer and wings together is too much. He tells Haman that's a saying from his hometown. That alcohol is something you learn from adults, and he'd like Haman to teach him about it. Haman says that he's such a caring kid, and that he truly wants to have a conversation with him. Then Karin hears a barking sound, and he starts to tremble, asking why now. Deokgu appears beside him, and Karin says this was meant to be his time to drink. Then it jumps back to Piggy freeing himself, while Diana says oh shit. Fermac tells Mariette they need to block it, and she says yes, then begins to cast an ice lance. She hits Piggy directly in the forehead, but quickly sees that her ice spear completely shattered. She's surprised by how little damage it's doing, and Fermac says it was a solid attempt, and he'll handle it from here. He lands a clean hit on it too, but says he can't feel it doing damage, and he starts to create distance. Piggy activates a rune, and Fermac says no way, then gets blasted into next year. He hits a wall, losing his consciousness. Diana starts to panic, saying that everything is being broken. As the animals begin to break out of their cages, since their seals are broken they can easily all escape. She tells all workers to evacuate and for the security team to activate all magic circles. They set up the spirit golems. They start to brawl with the monsters. But the golems are quickly bodied by a giant serpent, and some Godzilla rhino thing. The animals begin to have free reign on the facility, and Diana says she cannot let them leave, and says they should attack them. We see lightning strike down onto the beasts, and a werewolf goes to charge her. But we see Drawn's sword pierce one of them in the throat, and he says his employer's insight is quite scary. Diana is surprised, asking why he's here. He says it's a field trip, and starts to mog some of the monsters. Temu Godzilla starts to prepare an attack, then unleashes a fire beam to destroy the ground in front of Drawn. Cranial quickly takes the debris, and begins to form a golem with it. It looks way too damn good to be made from rubble. He pogs out, saying the techniques Karin taught him are working well. A few days ago, Karin forced him to train, giving him some golem techniques. Mr. Roboto takes some serious damage, but then roots begin to embrace it. As Roboto is now being reinforced by a certain druid. Yule wonders how the hell Karin knew this would happen, and taught her this. Diana sees the poisonous dragon flying towards the 3rd floor. But Alicia quickly flies in, slicing it. It falls to the floor, and she wonders if she killed it. Diana says this is really good timing, and she's never felt so thankful for students. But then she wonders why they are all here. They all in unison say that they are here on a field trip. Right now Karin's plan was going down perfectly. We see a familiar attack, as Mariette uses Realm of Blood. It creates a barrier, and Mariette says it's good that they listened to what Karin said. Then we see her trap Piggy in an ice attack. The assistants are nervous, and Mariette tells Piggy not to let his guard down, since she's also a special case. Godzilla roars, and Drawn says just having it move is breaking things. Cranial tells Yule to support him. Roboto rears his fist back, then hits Godzilla straight in the head. Godzilla tanks the hit, returning with his own. Cranial tells Yule to reinforce the golem's hand. She asks what he's cooking up, and he says that he'll explode all 5 of the spirit golems they've absorbed, releasing a ton of mana. Roboto blocks another attack, but now it's time to unleash their ultimate. As all of the prerequisites are checked. Roboto's arm has been properly reinforced with the golem's spirit cores. Cranial is now in full control, and yells, tapping the button in the middle. Roboto comes in with a bomber of a right. Then Cranial says good job Luden Warrior, and Yule asks when the hell he named it. Back to Karin again. He says he specifically chose to do Luigi's mansion to come to this port city. We see Deokgu looking like Dabi, and Karin says he has something he needs to do. He knocks on a door, and asks a nun if he can use her prayer room. She says of course. He enters the room, sits at the desk and says this should be the marker. And because of the situation, he hopes they come as soon as possible. We see a portal form behind him, and he says that the response was quicker than he expected. A magic blade is put to his throat, as we hear Josephine asking how he knew about this, saying he better answer well. Karin smirks, since now isn't the time for this. Saying first, there are urgent matters to deal with. Back to the fight, Alicia says she's never seen anything like this in her life. The snake from earlier flies at her, and she says she shouldn't get distracted. She realizes she has to face it alone, and she recalls Mariette saying that Karin told her not to use dimensional severance. She avoids the attack, and says Karin must have said that because he saw the potential in her, but she doesn't know if she's got it in her. She hears a sound, and looks over to see the realm of blood, but it begins to crack, launching Mariette through the air, as Piggy broke out. She falls to the floor, and Alicia calls out to her. Mariette grunts on the ground, saying it's just as Karin told her. Since he said she probably won't be able to beat Piggy. It turned into a demonic animal after consuming one of the original runes, giving it 100% resistance to physical and magical attacks. Piggy roars. She stands back up saying that Karin asked her to do this. So she refuses to give up. She charges in with her blood spears. Alicia gets distracted, and the dragonflies goes to bite her. But she realizes it, and says she has no choice but to succeed too, and readies her blade. Diana is shell-shocked by what she's seeing. Mariette uses a larger attack called the Snow Flower, landing direct blows on Piggy. Even though Piggy and Mariette were crawling, Mariette was holding her own, because she is special. Diana realized that this is some shit out of the history books. Piggy charges forward, Mariette launches an ice attack, but the attack does nothing to Piggy. She quickly follows up with a blood and snow wall formation, to block off Piggy. Piggy easily breaks through it. They were fighting hard to stop the monsters, but everyone felt it. That defeat was closing in on them. Piggy charges at Mariette, and we see where she is destroyed. But he doesn't see Mariette anywhere in sight. We see Dioku, and he's carrying Mariette and her staff. She realizes it means Karin's here. Alicia avoids the dragons. She tries to think about how to beat it without domain severance, wondering what Karin would do. The dragon turns back around. And she says she has no other choice. She dodges the attack by going into the air. Saying she needs to stick to the basics, dodge and cut, focus only on these things. We see her do exactly that, dodging every attack, unleashing an onslaught of slashes along the dragon, with a strong slash along the throat. The dragon screams, and crashes into a wall. She laughs saying she did it, and that she didn't need domain severance. Then she hears Karin saying good job, and she turns around to see him saying that they've done well. Cranial and Yule also beat Godzilla, and Cranial goes full gremlin saying he doesn't need Karin, just his golem. Karin says Godzilla is down, but where did the dragon get off to? Alicia starts to yap, and he says to focus on the situation, asking where Piggy is. Alicia says Mariette is blocking it, saying she needs to go help. Josephine then asks Karin what the plan is now, saying if he brought her here, he must have a plan in mind. He says yeah, she just needs to help catch Piggy. She says there are a lot of monsters besides Piggy. He taps the floor. We get an Ocean's 11 type flashback with Mariette putting runes on the feed for the monsters. We see a fire in their chests, as they all ignite. This is the case for all the other monsters who ate the runes too. It was because of the resonance from the silver spear. This was all part of Karin's plan. He tells Alicia it's time to get started, and explains that among the mid and upper ranked monsters, there are 30 left, with Piggy being one of them. He smirks, saying no need to worry. Telling Dron it's time to lock in, and tells Yule and Cranial to stop being crazy too. He asks Mariette if she's okay, and Karin says now that the main cast is here it's time to get this shit started. Karin says that they still can't let their guard down. Because what they are facing is the final boss of Act 2, and it alone ruled an entire mountain range. Mariette tells them all to dodge. Piggy charges towards them, and Cranial goes full psycho. Karin tells him they can't face it head on, but Cranial ignores him and runs straight in. Cranial says they've already defeated Godzilla. Roboto goes in with a flying knee. But Piggy just absolutely destroys it. Cranial starts to break down. Karin says since it's come to this, Cranial needs to just keep fighting the pig no matter what. He tells the rest to spread out. He gets Yule to force Roboto together with roots. Yule starts to unleash her magic, and wraps around Piggy completely ensnaring him. She wonders if it worked, but the original runes activate. It breaks out of the roots easily. Yule wonders why it's so strong. Karin tells Dron to flank it, and Dron shoots his swords out saying as expected of Karin, waiting for the right opportunity. He has his blade of flames, and blade of lightning. Saying it won't be easy to handle the boar, even with these. They fly directly towards Piggy, but the original rune activates again. The attacks bounce off of Piggy, and Drawn wonders how the hell he's not being damaged at all. Mariette tells Karin to do something, and he says he knows. He yeets Deokgu at Piggy, and it actually manages to knock Piggy back a bit. Karin says in order to target the Piggy they need to split the attacks between physical and magical. We also learn there are 8 original runes, which are needed to go to paradise. The original runes are how Piggy became so strong. It changes its fur to negate damage for physical attacks its red fur, and magic attacks blue fur. This is its absolute tolerance. It also has a secret gold fur. Karin tells Yule and Cranel to hold onto him somehow. He tells Drawn to fight from mid-distance, and he and Drawn will wait from the rear. Mariette asks what her job is, and he says to leave attacking to Deokgu. Just move exactly as he says. He tells them to not worry about what comes after, and don't even bother thinking about something that isn't this fight. Just give it their all, and they will win. Piggy speaks enchantment table, and charges in. Roboto drops in from the top ropes, and together with Yule it begins to entangle Piggy. But its fur changes to red, and the attack gets broken. Karin tells Drawn it's his turn to attack, and Drin's swords fly straight towards Piggy. But of course they get ignored by his fur. Deokgu flies in this time, and goes straight into Piggy's head. Cranel says it worked, and it was definitely a stronger hit than before. But Deokgu realizes that the fur color hasn't changed, and that Piggy baited them into attacking him. Piggy opens his mouth, firing out a rune of light that launched Deokgu into a wall. Karin tells Mariette to retrieve him, and use Blood Spear as a cover. She launches her blood spears towards Piggy, and he uses his blue fur to just negate all of the hits. Karin says it's his turn to get started. And starts to run in. Karin calls it a smurf since it's blue. Asking how he plans to block this, and jumps in with his spear. He throws the spear directly at Piggy, landing a hit with his side. Cranel and Yule are surprised by how much power was in his throw. Karin clicks his tongue saying he barely missed, and Piggy sure has good reflexes. He tells Mariette to use Blood Spear again, since if he uses his blue fur to block her attack, he can't negate Karin's attack. And it's the same for the opposite as well. So how will he block simultaneous attacks? Piggy makes an ugly bastard grin, Karin gets knocked back, and Mariette's attack is blocked too. Cranel is surprised, and Karin says that he's finally using his trump card. It's absolute tolerance for both attacks. Which is also known as indestructible gold, as his fur has that hue. Piggy starts to laugh. Karin says it only lasts for 5 minutes. But that nobody can face him when he is in this state. As he's charging at them, Karin tells everyone to haul ass, since they need to buy 5 minutes. Drawn says it won't work, as they have nowhere to possibly run to. Karin didn't realize they were trapped, and wonders if this was planned. Piggy keeps laughing, and that he purposefully charged into the walls. Cranel goes in with Roboto saying it's his time to shine. But of course he gets one shot. Mariette launches a magic attack out, but alas it was futile too. Now it is time for Piggy to break free from his prison. Karin starts to prepare to go Ultra Instinct, and says that there's nothing to do. But we see him smirking, saying there's one method left. We see Alicia's sword, and she jumps into the air behind Piggy. He looks up to see her, and she begins to unsheath her sword. She begins to see Piggy inside of her domain, and then she uses domain severance slicing Piggy. The attack leaves a giant shockwave where Piggy was. We hear Karin saying wow, and he starts to hype Alicia up and she wonders what to do if Piggy moves again. He says not to worry, as Josephine can handle the rest. There is a crazy magic circle above Piggy, as he gets tethered by chains. Josephine pulls out her whip, yes please. Karin smirks saying that while gold fur is strong, it has a pretty long cooldown. He tells Mariette it's her time to shine, and she says she's got it. She creates a giant crystal made of blood. Karin and the rest run as he tells Josephine it's up to her now. She's excited. Mariette says that she can end this. Mariette sends I guess it's her ultimate attack. It's the Great Blood technique fused with her Crimson Spear. It completely decimates Piggy, leaving nothing but his origin rune behind. We see Fermac with the original rune in his hand. Turns out Fermac joined the academy 10 years ago, pretending to be a professor. We see the main party cleaning up the extra mobs left behind, and now all Fermac has to do is leave the academy through a secret tunnel. But he's surprised, as Karin asks him how his martial brother Valtazar is doing, as Karin is waiting for him and calls him martial nephew. Fermac asks what he means by martial nephew. Karin says that since Fermac's teacher is his master's disciple that she renounced, it means he's his martial uncle. Fermac finally realizes Karin's identity, since there's a single conclusion he can draw from seeing the spearmanship. At first he thought Karin was also a disciple of the same master, but since he didn't have the information he decided to just ignore Karin instead, and he sent Karin out to exclude him from his plan, and he could leave peacefully. Karin smirks, saying it was all working out so well for him, but he won't let him go out with the origin stone. Fermac says a student shouldn't know about this, asking if Josephine said something, but says no way. He puts his gauntlets on, saying that he sees now. He gets into a fighting stance, saying Karin is an enemy. Karin says that Fermac is a famous first-rank knight in the world. He's actually the mastermind behind unsealing Piggy, and will appear later on. One of the 4 executives, he's at least on par with Lunia, and can reach special rank too. Fermac says that he sure is arrogant because he showed a bit of talent, asking why he thinks he can fight him. He says the Sung Jin Wu line of Arise, creating a shadow clone of himself. Karin says it's his ability to be able to attack offensively in multiple places. But he picked this spot on purpose. As it's where he farmed mandrakes, we see a rune he wrote when Mariette asked him what he was doing in the sand. Fermac is surprised by the sun rune, and Karin says that it's his natural enemy. Shadow-type magic needs shadows as the name implies, just as water needs water and so on. The runes from all over the floor begin to light up brightly. Fermac says shit, and realizes the runes are across the entire ground. Karin says that he's engraved enough to last for 20 days, and he has a lot of spare time these days. Karin knew he would exit here, and Fermac calls him cowardly. Karin says he should just call him prepared. Fermac says he'll acknowledge his perseverance. Fermac dashes in using his movement skill called radio, closing the gap. Karin raises his spear up, swiping down at Fermac, but he gets hit with an after image. Fermac comes back in with a monster straight, but Karin evades it. Fermac wonders how the hell he dodged. But Karin isn't missing the chance, and swings back instantly. Fermac dodges, and Fermac starts to compliment his experience. Karin says he shouldn't act like a professor. Fermac says he's been doing it for 10 years, it's an occupational hazard. Karin says he'll die here regardless. Fermac creates distance after evading Karin, then draws a rune onto the air called Rai. Karin tells him that it's a duel, which strikes something in him. Fermac says he doesn't have the loyalty to agree to a duel with him. Karin says he should agree, since that's the commandment that imprisons him. Just like how Karin can't turn a blind eye, Fermac can't refuse duels. Fermac asks if this is why he came alone, and Karin says that duels have to be one-on-one. They have a WWE stare down, and Fermac raises his gauntlets once more, saying he's the king of paradise, Tates Valtazar's disciple, Fermac Damon. Karin says that he's the queen of paradise, Aaron Danua's first spear. For the duel to be valid they must both reveal their names to one another. They both dash straight in, and Karin says there will be only one outcome to this. The system quickly chirps up, saying that him stopping Fermac is part of his commandment to save the world. So he gets a juice stat buff, along with some other buffs. And the system says it wishes the hero Karin luck with this fight. We see a shockwave, and the ground being destroyed. Fermac bobs in closing the gap, and Karin loosens his grip, thrusting his spear at Fermac, but he eepos his way out of them. Karin pulls his spear back, Fermac charges in. Karin stabs it into the floor, and uses it to pivot himself out of Fermac's attack. He jumps over him, and Fermac turns. Karin attacks while in the air, and Fermac blocks them, saying he's quick. But not fast enough. He uses radio to dash behind Karin. But Karin is ready for it. We see his attack draws blood. But that Karin got smacked in the face, causing him to get sent flying. While Karin catches himself, Fermac gets back in, saying even if he's cut he can't miss this chance. Karin realizes he's about to get comboed, but begins to block Fermac's gum gatling. Fermac comes in with a powerful left. Karin says he has to block this to get his chance to attack, but something caught his eye. He saw Fermac's fist began to open. Fermac grabs onto Karin's spear, and begins to draw a rune onto it. Then radios it across the area. He asks Karin what he'll do now, and punches him saying he's a spearman without a spear. Karin coughs from the weight of the punch, but gets knocked back. Karin regains his balance, and goes to retrieve his spear. But it won't come out of the tree. Fermac appears behind him, punching at Karin's head. Karin says even without his weapon. He is a martial artist. He hits Fermac with rapid palm strikes, saying the basics of a martial artist is physical combat. He lands a powerful hit on his chest with his 8 trigoms palm, but Fermac seems fine. saying he was almost surprised. Karin is shocked, as Fermac says his basics aren't as good as his spear, as he has taken 0 damage. Fermac hits Karin with a liver shot. Karin's technique was good, but he overlooked the fact that while he polished his physical combat a bit, it is the only thing that Fermac has polished. Karin head falls backwards, but Fermac doesn't miss a beat, blow after blow. Karin begins to lose his footing. Fermac says seeing as how he's just getting abused he must have given up, and that he'll end this shit now. He comes in with an absolute bomb, but we see Karin's spear is back, and he blocks it. Fermac says he definitely threw the spear away. Karin says he acknowledges Fermac isn't a normal opponent, and we learn that he was taking the hits to get closer to his spear. Karin swings back at Fermac. It is barely avoided. Karin loosens up his grip again, stabbing Fermac 3 times, with one going through his stomach. Karin sends him flying for the first time, but Fermac is much faster than Karin to catch his balance. Saying he's truly impressive, and every action so far has been close to the correct answer. And he's at a disadvantage again. Karin tells him to stop acting like a professor. Fermac takes his glasses off, saying yeah he truly needs to end things here. Then uses his own blood to draw runes onto his forearm. The runes Karin drew begin to raise into pillars of dirt. As Fermac has summoned a whole shadow citadel. Like Mariette's realm of blood. And his commandment of serving the shadows activates. Fermac says that using the rune of the sun was smart, but with that petty ability he can't dispel the shadows any longer. This is a place only for the great warriors of the Shadow Paradise, so it's time to lose. He can choose to die by his fist, or die to one of the demonic beasts of paradise. Karin smirks, saying the battle is a one-on-one. Fermac realizes he's right, and Karin says he knew he'd pull this card out. Karin pulls out the golden mandrake, and it lets out a super cute scream, completely dispelling the shadow demons. The golden mandrake cannot be blocked by magic abilities, so all of the shadow beings have been deleted with this. Karin asks if he really thought such a thing would work, and like he mentioned earlier, he will be killing Fermac here, right now. Karin asks what he'll do now. The mandrake will keep screaming, then he tells Fermac he has regeneration and pain tolerance. The longer this goes on the more he'll get used to it, asking Fermac how long he'll be able to withstand it. Fermac summons his shadow clones again, saying the moment he stepped foot into the Shadow Citadel, his chances of beating him were 0. Karin dodges one of the clones, instantly having it. But one gets behind him, restraining him. Karin helicopters his spear to destroy it. As Fermac comes behind him with radio again, Karin blocks the surprise attack, but the power of the hit knocks Karin into the wall of the citadel. Fermac continues his pursuit with radio and the clones. Karin says he can't deal with this anymore, asking if he even listened to him. Karin rips his shirt off, and begins to shine brightly like the sun. Fermac realizes his shadow clones have been dispelled again, and we see Karin wrote the runes all over his body, saying this shit is a one-on-one, stop changing it. Fermac realizes he can't do anything to Karin with his shadow servants like this. Saying this is an act of suicide though, as it means his body will go up in flames. Karin uses Slithering Serpent to try and land a hit, then says it's time to stop with the petty tricks, and they should stick to pure combat. He tells Fermac to quit trying to save energy, and give him everything he's got. Fermac understands Karin is like an arch-nemesis, and decides to risk his life and that he must use his all on this fight. He begins to release his aura, and a skill that burns his aura core for power and speed. Karin starts to laugh, saying it should have been like this from the start. Karin uses the exact same technique. They both charge straight into one another. Fermac blocks his first attack, and counters directly to Karin's face. Karin eats the attack, and cuts off Fermac's arm. Fermac grits his teeth, coming in with his right, but Karin evades the attack, staying close. Then lobs off Fermac's other arm, with an onslaught. Fermac realizes it's all over for him, and he drops to his knees. Panting with his final breaths, he lets out a long exhale, and sees Karin looking down on him, and feels nothing but respect. His final words are him saying amazing to Karin, as he's stabbed in the chest. F in the comments for Fermac, he was such a cool character. Karin says that he won, and when he closes his eyes he can hear screams. From when he faced Fermac after losing to him in the second act before, and there was a one-sided massacre, and he lost many of his friends. This time it will be different, as he stands over Fermac's corpse. He leans over and says as expected he didn't have it, he was looking for a secret treasure of the druids. Karin pulls the origin stone out Fermac's pocket. Karin explains again that Valtazar is gathering the 8 original runes, in order to bring Shadow Paradise into the world permanently, so he cannot let him get his hands on this. Karin wonders why it's even so important. He says he understands their anger and resentment, but they are doing it wrong. He sighs and falls to the floor. He says that was a crazy fight. His eardrum is busted, and his torso is hella burned, even with his regeneration. The pain is manageable, but the injury inflicted by Fermac, his liver is pierced and his ribs are completely shattered, his insides are a mess. He can barely move his left arm and leg. He says he thought he was used to the pain. Then he begins to lose consciousness. A window appears saying he defeated Fermac, and goes to give him rewards. But he says he's worried about other things, and he gains 60 points for the fight, along with a secret treasure map called Findia's Son. He wakes up to see Alicia's hair, and she's carrying him on his back. Karin asks how cleanup went. She tells him that Drawn headed back instantly, and Yule and Cranel are fine. Karin goes to ask about the mandrake, but she beats him to it saying she got it. He asks how she knew what he wanted to say, saying she isn't that smart. She says she's tempted to drop him now. They begin to rest on a bench, and he lays his head on her lap. He asks her about domain severance, saying it weren't for her they'd not have been able to beat Piggy. She says now she recalls it, during their potion making, and mandrake farming. Karin was drawing runes all over the floor. So he was preparing for this ahead of time. Karin says he was, then she asks why he fought him alone. She says there's nothing wrong with fighting together. He realizes that's true and says it's better when less people die. She says that she guesses it's fine, and looks happy saying that he did great. It jumps to the temple, and we hear Jaeger and Lark talking about how Karin is injured. They decide to visit him, saying without them nobody else would go. They open the door saying they brought snacks because they know he's lonely. Only to see Elisa, Warren and Mariette all in his room trying to feed him. Karin sees them and asks if they brought snacks for him. They look super happy to see their bestest friend. As they all continue to try to feed Karin, we see both Jaeger and Lark sitting beside the bed. They are both crying tears of happiness, saying how envious they are of Karin, and say that they should not have come here. Alicia says that it's not often they gather like this and they should play a game to pass the time. Mariette agrees, saying that they could invite Karin's friends as well. Their mood instantly changes. This time they are actually happy to be here. Someone knocks on the door, and Jaeger goes over, opening it, wondering who it is. He is surprised to see Josephine. Karin says that they came as expected and he was going to go see them anyway. We see Eryu asking Karin how his body is. Karin greets him, saying that it's about time he starts to reveal his cards a bit to his teacher. Eryu apologizes for making all of Karin's friends leave, saying that this had to stay confidential. He says he understands, and Eryu says they have many questions and it's not something they can overlook like they did with the Mariette incident. Karin says that he needs to move the conversation along a bit and comes out of the gate, saying that Fermac was a spy. Josephine goes to tell Eryu something, but he says that he knows. Karin says they aren't surprised, as expected, and they probably figured it out by looking at the commandments on his body. Karin instantly jumps to the main point, saying that Fermac was a disciple of none other than Balthazar. Josephine says that's impossible and tries to say something about what happened 80 years ago, but Karin says that the 6-step spearmanship, along with the other things, were all taught by Balthazar personally, and to be clear, he is the same. Josephine readies her whip, saying there's no way that he is the same, asking if he's also a disciple of Balthazar. Karin says no, and there's no need to be wary of him. He's not going to give them information that they can act on right away. He instantly says that Eryu's body is just a doll and that the main body is at the castle and probably can't leave. Eryu is surprised that he knows this, but he continues, saying that their disciple Balthazar is still alive and he is very strong, much stronger than before, nor is he alone. It's all because of Eryu's indecision 80 years ago. We see Eryu is surprised. Karin continues, saying that the origin was split across the world due to the betrayal of Balthazar. The only ones that Eryu has recovered so far have been 2 pieces, and even that would have been taken away if he had not stepped in. Including the Stone of Fate. Liao Fail, the 4 secret treasures of Manhua, are probably in his hands. If the confrontation happens, Balthazar will no longer be considered an usurper and says that surely Eryu will understand, and calls him by his real name, Aaron Manhua. And he shows the origin stone. Karin says that it's all coming to light. The reason why Josephine, with her 80 years of tenure, never became the chairman. Why the rising star, Eryu, that suddenly appeared as the chairman. The reason is simple. 80 years ago, it was a chairman named Viren. And then 50 years ago, it was Weeg. And now it's currently Eryu. The truth is that they are all bodies made of runestones to watch the world all created by Eren. She asks him what he wants, and he says that they both have the same goal. He starts to undress to reveal the commandment written on his body. And he says that he will gladly become her first spear. He begins to kneel, saying that he doesn't care how he is treated by her. As he recalls her in the past, she said that she is an adult. And as long as she is one, she has the duty to protect children like him. And that he has not forgotten the warm act of sacrifice she had shown him. And now it is his turn to protect her. It jumps to some time later in an underground area. We hear Josephine telling Eren that she is against it. And we see Eren for the first time. And she is surprised that Balthazar is still alive. But she wonders if they can trust Karen. Josephine tries to tell her not to trust people, but she says that she knows this. And that they should watch over him since they can't be sure yet. She says it is something she can't decide easily since she holds so much responsibility. Since everything he said could be a lie. But what she does not understand is why he looked at her with such sad eyes. And she starts to wonder if she is going to trust him, along with what led him to look so sad. We learn that during the Academy's summer break, there is a reassignment of ranks depending on performance. The rank reassignment ceremony also has a special meaning. If the rank you received upon entrance was temporary, this rank is considered official as it is given by the Guardian Association. We see everybody sitting there eating while waiting for their verdict. And Karen looks around, asking why she brought so many potatoes. She says that today is the ceremony and it would be best to steam and hand out enough food for everybody. As there is still a lot in storage. Karen says it is weird that there is such a large storage solely for potatoes. They finally start to announce to the students that they will have their ranks changed. And Karen says it is time to get up. They call up Mariette, and we see that she is a bit nervous about it. They say that despite facing unfortunate accidents, she showed a strong will, proving herself by making great contributions to preventing a huge incident in the testing ward. Karen says you could say that her progress wasn't actually a lot since she didn't get to leave the city after turning into a vampire. However, she made achievements by assisting Professor Diana in her research. On top of that, her efforts in holding back the King of the Iron Mountain prevented a ton of casualties. Eren steps forward and says that with her recommendation from the Merkaba Academy's chairman and the Southern Guard Association's chairman, she will finally be promoted to semi-special rank. All of the potato enjoyers begin to cry, saying that she is the youngest semi-special rank to date. And that this is a legendary moment. Eru continues, saying that the names of the students they will be calling out now, just like Mariette, have made great contributions in stopping the testing ward incident. While everybody knew about the King of the Iron Mountain bit, the rest of the details weren't really spread out. The happenings there have been kept secret, including the existence of him being here and the betrayal of Fermac. They call forth both Cranel and Yule, along with Alicia and Dran, and then finally Karen himself. Eren says that with their achievements at the test ward, they will also be promoted to special semi-first rank. And that Karen, while being a 5th rank guardian, has proved himself to be much more exceptional than what they originally believed. And that he will be promoted all the way to 1st rank guardian. Everybody starts to go crazy since someone who went to the academy as a 5th rank is now a 1st rank. And that it only took 1 semester. Saying that it makes no sense that a 5th rank could even become a 1st rank to begin with. Karen says that his abilities may be questionable, but the reason for being given a rank that is better than the semi-first rank is also because of the fact that he fought Fermac. That was still a very fun fight. R.I.P. our boy. The important part here is the special rights of the 1st rank knights. And that they have the ability to take in guardians directly. Karen smiles and says that it's finally starting, and if this were the game, it would be the 3rd year. Even in his previous iteration, he barely got here by the 2nd year. And this will make a huge difference. And he looks over very happily and warmly at everybody else on stage, saying that he can't wait to bring them under him. Sometime later, everybody gets asked what they plan to do on their breaks. Dran says he's going to make money. Jaeger says he's going to go home. Lark says that he applied for an internship. Of course he did. Yule says that she's going to visit some other druids. Cranel says that he'll be heading west as there's an old castle that's going to be torn down, and he wants to create a new core. Alicia cries, saying that she's going to have to return to her family. Her grandpa is calling for her. Karen tells her to have a safe trip, and they ask him what he's planning to do. He's asked if he's going home. He simply says no. Last time he tried to go home. During this time. But as soon as he got home, it was entirely empty as his family decided to go on a trip without him. Alicia says she understands, but asks if he would like to come with her, as she's scared to go by herself. Karen thinks about it, saying it's unfortunate, But he'll have to join her next time. Though he did want to experience the East. But he is somewhere he needs to be. We see Mariette waving as she calls out to him. And she runs over, as Karin says he needs to leave the academy now. And that he has plenty of time before the next episode. And if it isn't now, he won't be able to go to where he has in mind. It jumps to a train zooming through the forest. Inside, we see a suspicious robed man who opens a box, showing weapons. And he looks over at other robed men, and they exchange glances, saying that their preparation is perfect. He stands up, telling everybody to put their hands up and give them everything they own. People begin to scream, and he tells them that it's best for them to cooperate unless they want to face him, who is a semi-first rank. Karin and Mariette enter the room, saying this doesn't seem right, and it looks like they came at the wrong time. The man swings his sword behind, asking why they can't read the room, and to raise their hands if they want to live. He stops the blade at Karin's throat. And Karin says if he wants hands, he'll give him hands, and uppercuts him into the ceiling. His subordinates are surprised. Karin asks him if this is what he wanted. And we are on to the next arc called the South Ward. We get a flashback to the secret library of the academy, back when the Duke possessed Lark's body. We see Karin looking at the grimoire for the regeneration book. Inside, Duke begins to describe how he saw a warrior who was dying. In the battlefield that reeked of blood, there was a man who had his intestines tied around a boulder. He was asked if he wanted to be sent off with mercy, but the warrior responded that he'd be thankful for some water. Respecting the warrior's wishes, the Duke gathered water and gave it to him, but to his surprise, the man's wounds healed completely. Karin wonders why this is so intense and closes the book, saying that was good. The Duke then asks him if his castle in the south is still standing. Karin says yes, and he tells him that if he ever has a reason to go there, to look in his office, it might still be there. Karin asks what he's talking about, because he never found anything in his past life. The Duke says that it's something that he has to find himself, and he hopes that he has the ability and courage of that warrior. As if he does have his courage, there's nothing he won't be able to do. It was a humble man, not a hero or a sage, who swore to save the world. There's always the option to run away as well. Yet Karin did not run, so he respects him. Then he fades out after thanking him for telling him about his wife and daughter. Back to the present, the train stops at the southern plains. Karin says this is why he's here, due to the Duke's words, and why he came with Mariette, who is a southerner. The train guy tips his hat, thanking them, saying that if it wasn't for them, they would have been in trouble. Karin laughs, saying it wasn't much, and the man hands him a bag of money, saying to take this at least. Karin says he didn't need to, but he won't refuse his kindness. In reality, he's just happy because of his duty about not turning a blind eye. He was given 2 points, and he starts laughing maniacally. They walk off, and she says she knows some places they can go eat, and he asks if she knows the area well. She says of course, since she's been here a lot. Karin explains that this is the entrance to the southern plains, and all carriages that stop here go to the big city in the south called Left City. That ride itself takes at least 8 hours. As they walk through, she tells him there's a transfer station that she often uses, and we see a wyvern landing zone. Karin says that he's used this method a couple times in his past life. It's much more comfortable and faster than carriages. Karin says that this is quite expensive, and that it costs at least 30 silver coins. But Mariette says no, as her family sent her one that's different. Karin asks her what she means. We see a giant griffin carrying a house, and the griffin is named Reesfelger. It is a boss-level vehicle. We learn it is the cost of 12 wyverns. At the air traffic control tower, a man named Duff says they will be clearing the landing site. As they watch it descend, they wonder what the Dunelefs are doing right now. One of the men says it will arrive soon, which means Mariette is coming. Reesfelger sets down the house very gently. The door opens as an army of maids and butlers bow before Mariette, congratulating her on her break and on her promotion to semi-special rank. Karin says he didn't know why he didn't notice before, as their destination was Left City and to the east was Duna City. He then asks Mariette about her family's farming and how big of a scale it is. She tells him a number, and he says that's incredible, but she says that he's misunderstanding, and tells him that it is much larger than what he originally thought. He is completely dumbfounded and says that it's around 2 million hectares, which is around 10,000 square meters. You can do the math if any of you want to. Mariette's family are icons in the South. They have their own salon, grocery store, post office, anything you can think of. The many signs he saw on the carriage ride to the residence showed that. Karin says this shit is crazy. They finally make it to the main residence. He says she never mentioned being rich before. She says she's not rich, But her parents are. He says that's what rich people always say. A butler named Paul laughs, saying that she'll inherit the assets anyway, since she's the firstborn of the family. He asks who this guy is, saying he came out of nowhere. She laughs, saying that he's surprising the guest. He asks for their luggage, and then asks her who Karin is. She introduces him as one of her juniors. He quickly runs over, while blushing, saying that for generations, the family has had a son-in-law living with them. Of course, they provided a lot of support and treatment. He keeps yapping, and Karin is asking him what he is talking about, saying that he's speaking too fast for him to understand. We learn that Mariette has had so many marriage offers, they could fill up a potato warehouse. Karin quickly asks her about the castle they mentioned earlier, and she says that now that he mentions it, she heard somebody bought it recently. She says the name of the castle. Paul says that he heard somebody bought it recently, and someone called Count Cassius bought it. Karin says that in his past life, somebody owned it too, and that it was a trader from an archipelago at the end of the south. He was quite a nasty human, as he insulted them constantly. In order to receive his permission, they spent all night and day fighting the great sea serpent, and after a ton of hardships, they finally got to enter Duke Castle. Karin sighs, asking if he needs to go through all that shit again. Mariette quickly says that she told Count Cassius about them coming beforehand, so they could go together, and that he seemed to want to enter the castle. The man agreed, saying that they could come any time, and that he's hosting a party on Friday, so that's when they can go. Karin fades out of existence for a second, and cries, saying that he didn't realize that it could be handled so easily. Even though in his last life, he went through that dog show trying to enter, yet she got in so free. Mariette then suggests that they go shopping for outfits for the party, and he agrees. They head to a street called Mariette Street, and Karin wonders what shopping is meant to be like. Everything they're buying is brand name, and very expensive. He says this is enough money to become wealthy in a real estate town within Seoul, and that he hopes she's not going to make him sign a slave contract. She says that they've arrived at their next stop, and he starts to cry, saying that she's scaring him, and she needs to stop buying him stuff. They enter a smithy, and a man asks if she is here for the commissioned item. She pulls out a box, saying that these are the same minerals that were also used in Alicia's otachi. She hands him an item that he couldn't obtain before, as even the academy didn't have any. It's called the Unbreakable Stone. Unlike the refined silver stone that couldn't last within the domain, the Unbreakable Stone would not break. If anything, it was stronger within domains. Surprised, he asks her how she got this, saying that there's not even a market for it, and that's a special stone which is used for a hidden piece in the game. She starts to blush, saying that if he coats his spear with this, he'll be able to use it with no problem. She says that this is her last present of the day, and seeing him happy makes her really happy too. He smiles and thanks her. That night, he is guided to the dining room, and he enters to see Mariette's family sitting at the table. She waves at him, and he learns that it's customary to dine with her family. He sees her mom and says that he's glad that she seems friendly. Before he goes to sit, her father says to wait, and he has something to ask before they eat. Depending on his answer, he may or may not be able to sit here. In the most serious tone imaginable, he asks Karin if he is a virgin. We are introduced to her father, Mard. Karin is confused and asks him to repeat his question. Both Mariette and her mother start asking him why he would bring this up during dinner. Mariette tells him to ignore that and sit down. But Mard says if he's become the son-in-law, he must be a virgin. Karin sighs, saying that this will not be a smooth meal. He then recalls that he just said son-in-law. Mard continues, saying that his daughter is off limits. She said that she would marry her dad, and he would never allow her to be with Karin. He instantly gets smacked into the table by Mariette, and he says, when did she get so strong? He says that she resembles her mother when acting like a gorilla. She starts dragging him away to eat him for later. She begs for him to stop talking. Her mother apologizes. Karin tells her that it's fine. She says that she's heard about him from Mariette's letters, and that she's really wanted to meet him. She stands up and bows, thanking him for all the help he has given Mariette thus far. He tells her that being treated so formally is a bit burdensome, and he only did what he could. Above all, Mariette deserves happiness. Her mother begins to blush, asking if that's the case. She says that when she got Mariette's letter, she thought that she'd been looking through rose-tinted glasses, but as expected. Then she goes to call him her son-in-law, but Mard comes back into the room saying that being thankful is one thing and he's only allowing them to hold hands. She starts to bark at him. Mard continues, saying that he needs to maintain his virginity, but they both slam him into the floor and beg for him to stop talking. Karin sighs, saying that they are quite a funny family. The next day, we are at the Duke's castle. Mariette greets the Count, and he runs out happily greeting her as well, saying that she is visited as promised and that the Blandria family welcomes her visit. Karin finds it odd that this is the same guy he met before, wondering if this is really even him. We see them walking down the carpet towards the party. Karin says that he is proud. If he had not saved Mariette, he never would have seen her dressed up so nicely and that they would have lost their princess. The other people start to say that they thought her coming here would just be a rumor and that Count Blandria must be up to something. Karin says that in the south, it's not an exaggeration to say that Mariette's family's influence is absolute, and it's really more beneficial to have Mariette show her face than to catch a sea serpent. He tells her they should enjoy the party a bit before heading up. We learn that they have brought their equipment, and when it's at its peak, they'll go talk to the Count and get their gear while heading to the office. A man quickly approaches Mariette, introducing himself as Garly of the Rondinium family. He says that he's always admired her and asks her to please dance with him. She's caught off guard. Many other men begin to bow, asking if she'll give them the first dance. She starts to feel overwhelmed and begins to nervously try to come up with an excuse. But Karin steps forward and kneels, stretching out his hand. The other men start to feel jealous. Karin says they're all energetic, but their manners are lacking. Karin grabs onto her hand and kisses it, asking her if she will take her first dance with him. He recalls getting scolded by a lady before, who told him that if there is a beautiful lady in front of him, it's adequate for a gentleman to kiss her hand and request a dance. Mariette begins to blush and turn beet red while saying yes. The band starts to go crazy playing some medieval type bangers. Karin says she's quite popular and asks if he was too reckless while apologizing. She says no and that she's enjoying this. Karin says it felt like he was abandoning his savior who gave him a free pass until this point, so he could not help but return the favor. He looks down at Mariette and says this is dangerous, and we all know exactly what he is talking about. He is a man of culture after all. He looks away, saying that this is making him a little embarrassed. She steps on his foot and quickly apologizes, saying that she's not good at dancing. He holds in the pain, saying that it's okay and thinks that maybe it's best for him to take the lead. He gets close, saying that she needs to put her left foot on his and they'll dance like that. She begins to blush even more, and he says even if his foot gets dirty it doesn't matter and that they don't need to worry about anybody else and just focus on each other. He tells her to look at him and smiles, saying that she just needs to enjoy the dance. He tells her to put her foot on his and to match his movements and to read the movements of the push and pull, and that she has good eyes. He starts to dance, saying that just as he has learned in his last life, the shaking eyes should meet the other's gaze and find stability. They both begin to laugh while enjoying their dance together. As the music continues, he says that he's glad that he could share a dreamlike moment with her. After their dance, the men quickly ask if she would like to dance with them as well. She tells them that she is tired and that she wishes to rest. Karin says that he'll take her to their lounge and he escorts her away. The other women start to comment on how they danced, saying that it was quite romantic that she danced on his feet. While it was clumsy, it was an impressive dance. They say that based on how she was smiling, she is 99% sure that Mariette has already fallen. It jumps to later as they enter the office and Mariette asks him what he is doing here. He says he has no idea, he is just looking for traces of the Duke. He finds an old book called The Duke's Story. In the game, there are traces of his wife and daughter that the player must find in the Duke's quest. Normally, giving this book to the Duke will end the side quest, but in the game and his last life, there was no line telling them to look in the office. He starts to flip through the book, wondering why he was called here. He says he is not sure, but he will look thoroughly. They search for quite a while and finally sit on the couch and relax, saying that this is definitely not easy. Mariette then tells him that she is hungry, and he asks if she did not eat at the banquet hall. She says that she didn't have time as they came here immediately. Then she begins to blush and looks over. Karin says that he recognizes that gaze. It is a sign that she wants to suck. She starts to tell him that she is realizing how pretty his jawline and collarbones are, and she jumps on his lap. He tells her that he sweat a bit, so it might not taste as good. She says that is even better and quickly changes it to that is fine too. She starts to pant while going to bite his collarbone and then begins to consume his blood. She lets out a long sigh afterward, and he asks if she is done. She says yes, asking if it hurt. He says that it might be because of his healing ability, but he can't feel anything. She says that she's surprised and quickly says that she didn't feel anything either. Then Karin remembers that he got it alongside the soul dust and wonders if this grimoire has something to do with it. He asks her to summon Diokgu. She quickly does, and we see him appear while kneeling. Karin asks if she can make it closer to an astral body. She says that she will try and tells Deokgu to hold on for a little bit, and he begins to whine. Karin says it makes sense as his body is technically being destroyed and he understands why he does not like it. He starts to disappear, and Karin says this is exactly the way it should be since he can't perceive spirits and that there must be something here. He begins to feel a chill as a red mist begins to form around him. He screams out to Mariette, telling her to prepare herself, but before he realizes, he is completely enveloped by it. He says that he understands and wishes the Duke had told him sooner. What was sealed inside the grimoire was the Duke's spirit. While he decided he couldn't die and was suffering from the desire of blood, it was the separation of his body and the soul. So if you were wondering where his body went, the answer is simple. It's standing right in front of Karin. The Duke then asks him how it is, how come some random person such as him has the remnants of his soul, and he begins to menacingly walk towards him, asking him what brings him to his castle. Karin quickly says that he is his distant junior, and the Duke says his appearance is not bad and he seems normal. Karin says that his assessment is better here than it was at the library. The Duke asks if he has seen his soul. Karin says yes and that he is curious about something. He asks if his body and soul are separated, how he is still so normal. The Duke tells him to stop talking and points his sword at him, saying that he will ask the questions and he just needs to reply. Karin pulls out his spear and sighs, saying that he thought things were going too well and realizes that it's not just a free present after all. For those of you who don't remember, the Duke's name is Duke, but he is also a Duke. The world often spoke about him as the strongest of his time, or rather the strongest of all time, and we see him clashing weapons with Karin. He says that now that he thinks about it, he came from meeting his soul, asking if he killed it. Karin says no, and he helped him find peace and ascent. He thought that he would bring him something other than this. Then he dodges the Duke's attack. The Duke says if his soul had guided him here, he wouldn't have brought a vampire, asking if he thinks he will fall for his lies. Karin asks him what he is talking about, and asks again how a body is moving without its soul. The Duke says that since this body is a vampire, it cannot die. It needed a piece of soul to be trapped in this castle, so that he wouldn't become a beast like the one he brought. Karin quickly says that Mariette is different, she is controlling the power of the vampire to trust him. The Duke stabs his blade into the ground, asking why he would believe him. To rid himself of the bloodlust over the last 800 years, he has worn out his soul, senses, and emotions. But there is only one thing that had not disappeared thus far. He takes off his mask to reveal that he has sewn his mouth shut and has scars everywhere. He says that he can't rid himself of his craving for the taste of blood, and that he can't simply believe him. If he plans on trying to stop him, he will not spare his life. Then he begins to pressure him. He says he didn't expect this, and that he should not have brought Mariette here. Due to his hatred of vampires, he is going crazy. If he was the strongest of his age while alive, he is at least a semi-special rank now, and he begins to use the sixth step, going full power off RIP. He uses Calamity Serpent Ultimate Essence, Rising Serpent Skies, and attacks the Duke. The Duke doesn't hesitate and quickly slicing through Karin's attack. Karin is surprised as the Duke raises his sword into the air, saying that this is the power of creation itself. In his youth, this was the power he gained from slaying a dragon. He swings downwards, using his skill called Dragon Murder. Karin realizes that he was wrong and that the Duke is even stronger than a special rank monster, as he gets sliced down the chest. It jumps to Mariette, as the Duke is saying that she is a petty beast, and asks how she hopes to live the life of a human. She asks what he is talking about, and the Duke asks if she does not consider herself a beast. If not, is she positive that she has overcome it with her will, saying that in the end, she will crave her lover's blood and will kill everyone she cares for. He charges forward at her, saying that she needs to disappear from his sight. He thrusts, and she dodges the attack, screaming no, and tries to explain herself. Deokgu appears behind the Duke, and the Duke casts a spell which quickly restrains Deokgu, tying him up in the usual pose. He says, as expected of a beast, the speed is faster than his in his prime, but there is no strategy. He stabs Deokgu, saying that it is a foolish beast that only relies on strength. Mariette quickly calls for Deokgu to come back, and realizes that it is not working, as the Duke is using something called Romania's Sealing Sword. It will seal Deokgu in front of the blades. The Duke says that immortality is meaningless in front of him, and slams her to the floor, saying that she needs to hurry and die. He takes off his mask, saying that a beast will always be a beast. She says no, that is not true. She recalls Karin, saying that she's okay. She says that he told her he would accept her. Karin's body begins to form in the space, and the Duke says that he'll say it again. They need to die. This is the only path that is left for them. She looks down at Karin in fear and drops to her knees. She starts to shake, seeing him heavily wounded, and as he begins to bleed out, her vision starts to go blurry. We see that her eyes begin to glow as she starts to lose her rationality. She starts to lean closer towards Karin, and the Duke raises his blade, saying that vampires should not live. Even as her loved one is dying, she cannot suppress her true nature. We see her bleeding from her mouth, and the Duke is surprised as she gives him a kiss to supply him with her blood. The Duke realizes that she is using her blood as an elixir and that she is giving it to him rather than wanting to drink his. She has overcome her limits. She should not have been able to suppress her nature. Still crying, she starts to beg for him to wake up. The Duke starts to feel regret, saying that he failed before, and he could not save anyone, as he succumbed to his desire. Yet what he is witnessing now shows that he was just too weak-minded. He looks up at the sky, full of sorrow, saying that he does not deserve to judge anything. He raises his blade, quickly stabbing it down into Karin's chest. We see it beginning to glow, as Karin's eyes shine. Mariette pleads with him, saying that he's done enough, asking how far he's planning to go. She begins to bawl, begging that he not take Karin away from her. He does not reply and continues pouring magical energy into the blade. The room quickly shifts back to the scenery of the office, and Karin says that he is okay, and that he is right here. She asks him if he really is okay, and he looks down to see the scar, asking the Duke why he saved him. Mariette is confused because her brain is smooth. The Duke swings his blade once more, and then drops it to the floor, saying that he's transferred his aura core to Karin, and now he understands why his soul led him here. He says that he sees the quality of a hero within him. He lacks greed but possesses the beliefs and pride that those who seek power often don't have. Above all, he's changed what he could not, and he has the right to change the world. What he could not protect 800 years ago, and that he should correct all the mistakes that he has made this time. His body starts to fade out, and he tells Karin to please become a hero, while fully fading out. They are surprised, and Karin says that he truly did not expect a gift such as an aura core. Mariette shoves her head into his chest, and he tries to tell her that his body is still in pain, but he can tell that she is truly upset as she begins to cry, saying that she was terrified that he actually had died, and tells him to promise that he'll never die without her permission. He smiles, saying that he's glad it ended out so well, and then kisses her on the head, saying that he promises. Due to obtaining the core, his aura rank has increased as well, and he's unlocked an ability called Duke's Demonic Nature, and now has a dual core. He says that he has just one thing he hopes for, and it's that the Duke's body and mind, which were in pain for 800 years, were finally able to rest in peace. What a Chad! Karin is looking at these notifications, saying that not only did he get a second core, but now it even has a special ability. But he finds it strange. In the game, and even in his last life, the Duke never gave anybody this power. He thinks it would have been nice if he did this from the get-go. He says their clothes are now drenched in blood, and he'll have to wash them, which will take forever to dry. A maid then enters the office, saying that she never thought there'd be a guest in here. Then she sees a half-naked Karin and a pretty much fully naked Mariette, both panting out of breath. He tries his best to explain that it's not what she thinks and that it's a misunderstanding she's having. She starts to blush, saying sweat, muscles, hot air. Karin tries his best to reassure her that she is misunderstanding this. She slams the door, apologizing, telling them to enjoy their time. Karin tells her to come back, saying not to leave. He thinks something has gone very wrong here. We hear Mard screaming, saying that he's going to kill him. It took around 20 days to clear up this misunderstanding. For those 20 days, he had to hide in the mountains while Mard searched for him using wyverns. He spent the entire time training his aura, but it's a relief that it was cleared up. He almost became the South's #1 enemy. Mariette starts talking while they head back in the carriage. She says that it will be the second semester and the festival preparations will start soon. She then asks if the business they started is doing well. He pops out sunglasses from nowhere and says, of course, she'll get several times what she invested. The large number of tourists that will come because of the festival and the rise in value from the lodging industry is going to be huge. Along with him selling all of the festival land, he is going to get so much money, and he starts drooling, saying that he is invincible and that the festival is truly the best. Then it cuts to him being completely confused, wondering what's going on as he sees a giant typhoon. He says this never happened in his previous life. Mariette puts her hand on his shoulder, saying that this will cause a problem for the festival opening and that it's okay to fail, as it's normal. But she grips down on his shoulder, saying that they should at least write an IOU. If he wants to repay her, he'll have to give her something that she wants, and he just needs to sign off on it. He says that she is making a hell of a Seuss offer and that there must be some other kind of way. He goes to the special dormitory, and Aaron welcomes him back, saying that it must have been difficult getting here because of the typhoon. He asks her where Josephine is, and she says that she is on her way back with Warren and tells Karen to stay here tonight. Since he's not an outsider anymore, she's planning to allow him to stay here starting his second semester. He understands that it's partially so he can be surveyed, as they can't trust him yet. He jumps to the point, asking what's the deal with the typhoon. Mariette says it seems like it's going to cause some damage to the city, asking if it will be okay. Aaron starts to drink her tea, saying that there is no damage to the city and it will probably be the outer areas that have more damage. Mariette says if the typhoon moves, it's going to hit the city. But Aaron says that it will not move, as it is not a natural phenomenon. It is the work of a monster. The story begins at an important sea route of a southern archipelago, going upstream along the Aegina Straits. At some point, it became entangled in the straits, the lone emperor of the ocean, the sea serpent. It went wild without a care for the economic situation of humans, and began to sink trade ships that invaded his territory. One man who wanted to become a hero set out to defeat it. We see the manner that they were just at, as Cassius asks his son if he must do this. His son, Levant, says that he is a first-ranked monster, and if he succeeds in defeating him, his promotion will also be guaranteed. We see him making a face full of frustration, as he was one of the people who tried his best to dance with Mariette, but she ignored him and walked away with Karen. He has some warped imagination that he was licking his lips like a freak. He says that he will defeat the sea serpent and bring peace back to their family. That is how one man's fiery heart and his raid group had a fierce battle for 5 days and 6 nights. It shows them celebrating that the serpent ran away, and they congratulated him. Levant says that he pledges this victory to Mariette. This is how he brought peace back to the strait. Well, not really, since they couldn't catch the serpent and lost it, and the serpent who ran away caused the loss of innocent lives. We see some typhoon bats. In order to breed, they become the cores of typhoons and protect themselves from enemies. It is nicknamed the golden bat because its blood, bones, and flesh are all elixirs. The injured sea serpent could not just go past them, and the female bat made the decision for the baby in her womb. She kept going north and north, trying as far as she possibly could, which is how she ended up in Merkaba Academy. This is where she chose to give birth. We see all of Karen's land getting destroyed. He says he never saw this coming, and that they are a rare species that can't even be seen on the continent in the summer. Why would it be here? He says that it must have been a butterfly effect that caused this. He makes the joke about how a butterfly's wings can cause a hurricane on the other side of the world. People start to tell him they have to evacuate as they can't work here anymore. He tells them to wait, saying they're almost finished and they can't leave now. They tell him the typhoon is getting worse and they'll die if they keep working on construction. They leave, causing him to wait and try his best to get them to stay. If the typhoon continues like this, the festival is done for. What's for sure is that if the typhoon expands, all of his inns will go flying. He spent 280 gold to purchase this land, and another 330 into buying workers and covering construction costs. He had to put another 220 in to complete the construction. Of all of this money, only 110 is his, and the rest he's borrowed it all. If his business fails, he'll have to cough up 720 gold. He makes a depraved face, saying that he is absolutely fucked. It jumps to a while later as they are holding an emergency meeting about the typhoon. Aaron called a few professors and students, saying they must be aware of why they have all been summoned. We see Ticket Gramps and even Diana as she asks if they have to subjugate it. They do. A professor in the back says he opposes it. His name is Edgar Linton, and he says the typhoon will stop in a month, so there's no need to take the risk. Another professor chimes in, asking what's his proof for that opinion. Her name is Lorella Mass. She has some mass. Edgar says that Alvin's breeding season is usually from June to September, and they are famous for repeating the short-term fertilization and pregnancy process. Even when considering different variables, the typhoon will stop in a month. Lorella says that there's not really a need to take on that risk, and she votes for maintaining it as well. The status quo. Another professor says that he thinks it's important to try subjugating it at least once. His name is Ogon Rentry. Ogon says that not only will the return of students be pushed back, but the festival will be disrupted. Above all, outsiders may think that the academy is playing it safe. Edgar says that the academy is an educational institution, and that subjugation is what the association should be doing instead. Everybody starts to think about it and offer their opinions. While Karin sits there, they go to say they will not do the subjugation, and he chimes in, saying that he lacks knowledge but to hear him out. He says that they swore that they will be brave and realize kindness and justice, that they won't go against their creed in front of death to protect the weak and defeat the evil. He screams, saying they are guardians, the protectors of humanity. Of course they need to subjugate it. Edgar says that he understands his fervor, but he thinks it would be more beneficial not to do it. He quickly asks how he can say something like that, asking if he does not see the victims who have lost their houses to the typhoons. We see that he is completely crying, saying that he is about to become a beggar. He tells them to pay attention to those who are forced to live on the streets right now because they lost their jobs and homes, and that they cannot calculate lives with money, asking how they can abandon them. Edgar says that's not what he was trying to do. Everybody else starts to take his desperation as chivalry. Karin says that this doesn't have to be chivalry or the oath of a guardian. It's not something as big as that. He begins to put on an Oscar-worthy performance, saying he just wants to save people. So the inn, and then corrects himself, saying he wants to save the people. Everybody starts cheering him on, saying they can't believe he has such passion. Ogon stands up, saying they will form the subjugation squad immediately, and they will protect everybody. Aaron says it seems like they've come to a conclusion. Karin is glad that his acting paid off, and the subjugation squad was quickly formed and headed out towards the typhoon. Edgar says that he's finished talking with the support group, and they just need to time things well. Ogon is surprised that Karin is so emotional, saying that he's so sincere about saving people. Karin starts to cry tears of happiness, saying that he's so glad to be able to protect everyone and that his life depends on this. The plan was simple. To catch the bat, which lives in the eye of the typhoon, they would receive help from the support squad to create a crack in the typhoon. If they succeeded in creating one, the entry squad would enter and defeat the Alvin. It would have been great if it went just like that, but there were already countless monsters in the middle of the typhoon. The monsters, caught in their attempts to eat the Alvin, have been hungry for a while and are extremely angry. Karin says he's not worried. Strong Hand Haman is a semi-first rank knight. There's also Ogon, who wields a 2-meter-long axe as if it was a pair of chopsticks. Edgar himself is a first-rank mage and the current party leader. While it looks like he is smoking, that is actually his mana stick. Above all of that, there is a first-rank knight just like Karin, as well as a second-year academy student, part of the North Island Savage tribe. His name is Crazed Warrior Berjacker. It would be strange if they were not able to defeat some monsters. Karin says he's pretty tall and asks Berjacker if he is half giant. Berjacker says to shut up and focus on the monsters. Karin says he's nicer than he looks and takes care of a werewolf on his side. He says they need to enter the typhoon's eye before the damage becomes too widespread. And of course, to stop the damage to his inns, he needs to stop the Alvin. Haman tells everybody they're entering the typhoon's eye too soon and to follow. On the inside, we see Edgar surprised. He did not expect this. There is a smaller typhoon within the typhoon. He's never seen such typhoonception before. The Alvin must have noticed the intruders were getting close, so she created another one. And that it's only possible due to her maternal instincts. Edgar asks Professor Ogon if he thinks they can get through it. He says they'll receive some wounds, but yes. Edgar sticks out a gun into the air, saying their side will have a lot of losses too, so there's no need to overexert themselves. He fires a flare off into the sky, requesting help from Diana. She starts to get excited, saying that for the first time in a while, she can release her full power. We see red lightning beginning to form above the typhoon. Edgar says this is a little dangerous and wonders if Diana is actually trying to kill them. He tells everybody to stay behind him as he will deploy a shield and that Diana has gotten too excited. We see her cast an ability called Red Sprite, as it sends out a massive shockwave upon crashing into the ground. We see some rubble from where the group was standing, and it begins to shake as they all throw it off of themselves. Haman says he doesn't like mages, since they all just want to kill knights. Edgar quickly says with this, things resolved well, and the typhoon will definitely have been corrected. Much to his shock, he sees that the typhoon is actually completely fine. He says that with that amount, it would be difficult for even semi-first ranked monsters to survive. Haman says that something is weird, and that the Alvin seems to keep growing larger and larger with every passing second. Edgar asks what's going on. Karin says it's called evolution and that the Alvin is evolving. It is a part of demon development. It's a unique phenomenon that occurs during the accumulation of experience in life. It isn't simply the stage when the alpha individual, who is the leader of the pack, sublimates, but the stage where the vessel of the species itself sublimates. The Alvin absorbed all of Professor Diana's thunder, and they can't consider her a weak monster anymore, as the Alvin now could be considered the king of thunder clouds. We see everybody getting sucked into the eye of the typhoon. Haman asks Edgar if there's nothing they can do, and he says even if they request assistance from the support squad, the Alvin will only get stronger. While they begin to panic, Karin laughs, saying it's time for him to step up. We see him stab his spear into the ground, and he says that he realized something. Martial arts are effective when your feet are firmly planted on the ground, and that he actually can't do anything, and he begins to get blown away. He yells, telling Berjacker to do something, and he asks what the hell he expects him to do. As they are both martial artists, they are completely weak without having their feet on the ground. Karin starts to panic, saying that he has 720 gold on the line. His life rides on whether or not he catches the bat. Karin calls out to him again, and Berjacker yells, asking what he wants. Then Karin jumps on his head, saying that just because he's in the air doesn't mean he doesn't have something to step on. He jumps off of Berjacker's head and then jumps off of Ogon, along with Haman and even Edgar, saying that he refuses to surrender to the monster. He starts yelling that he is going to kill it. This is now the meeting of a man who is blinded by revenge and a monster who wants nothing but to protect her child. Both of their lives depend on this moment. It will be quite a desperate fight, never mind. Karin starts to feel him stepping on something squishy and wonders why a slime came out of nowhere. But he rears his shoulder back, saying that it's not over yet. He uses the pagoda tree mountain to throw his spear using macro hit. As it gets close to the typhoon, we see it just completely loses energy, and he says that he can't help but feel it again. That all martial arts use the ground and you can do nothing while in the air. He starts to laugh after accepting his defeat, saying that it's all over now. As he begins to slowly lose vision, as he is being eaten by a slime, he says that he should have just used all of his money and bought some good-ass food. We see him close his eyes. That is how inside the typhoon, his whole world fell apart. We see a familiar figure fly in and kick the Alvin. Karin starts to crawl out of the slime, surprised, asking who is fighting it in the middle of the typhoon. He sees none other than Warren going toe-to-toe with this monster. We see her blows are effective, and she rears her fist back for a heavy one, hitting it smack in the forehead, seeming to create a hole right in the top of its head. The typhoon begins to shake even more violently, but the golden light in the middle completely stops it, blinding Karin for a second as everybody drops to the ground. Ogon wonders who stopped the typhoon. We see Warren and Josephine walking up. Karin is still surprised, so much so, he begins to cry while repeating a Bible verse. We see the Alvin's head get dropped to the floor just as Karin drops to his knees, saying that she is his goddess for saving him from the death that he would have been under. The typhoon only left minor damage before ceasing. Thanks to the early suppression, other than the highway, the city did not suffer much damage. Although there were some victims due to the rainy winds, they will recover. We hear Mariette telling people to take some food, and that their menu has potatoes and onion soup. Karin explains that the academy is funded by taxes, so the heroic image and symbolism are important for guardians. Volunteer work is a part of maintaining that image. We see a man asking for another potato, and Warren tells him to eat what she has given him. Karin tells her that she's being too mean. And he asks her if she knows when humanity began to form into a civilization. She tells him to stop acting like a professor. He says he's only heard about this, but the beginning of civilization is when a leg bone that had traces of having been broken and healed were discovered. If your leg breaks, it's obvious you'll die out in the wild, but the leg bone that had evidence of being broken had been healed, which means that somebody helped them until they were fully recovered. And when somebody is going through trouble, helping them out is okay. That's what the beginning of civilization means. This felt clunky, maybe bad translation. Warren walks away, saying that it's because humans are weak and that it's all meaningless to her, as there's no human who would help her. But he says that he would help her, which surprises her. And he says then it would mean something, wouldn't it? She goes to reply but bites her tongue, saying that a weak person shouldn't yap. She starts to walk away, saying that she is a living Jiangshi, a being created by using a living human that is close to a monster, and that if he knew her past or anything else about her, he surely wouldn't be able to trust her. She calls him an idiot, and then she hears return it, as one of the voices inside of her head tells her to return her body. She knows that it's not hers, but she says that she will never give it back. She wonders if Karin would really help her, knowing this is how she was on the inside. Outside of Merkabah City, which is where the academy is, people say that it's the safest place in the world, but the truth is very different. There are back alleys everywhere, and the ones who lead this lawless area are called the Black Star faction. Their main sources of income are slaves and illegal bootleg liquor distribution, but to solidify their position in the area properly, they have special businesses. For example, dealing with bad customers, which happen to be Karan drinking. He starts yelling, asking what kind of alcohol they're serving here, that it tastes like straight ass, and to call the manager. A man enters, asking who's acting up in his bar, and Karan says they're finally here. We learn the Black Star faction sells to this tavern, and at the same time, receives a protection tax from it. There's no better place to meet a member of the faction than here. The man says that judging from his appearance, he seems to be an academy student. So what is a minor doing here? He tells Karan if he leaves, he'll pay for his drink. Karan pours the beer on his head, asking if he's the manager of this place. The men start to act up, but the leader stops them, and he says that he's met tons of kids like him who act up because they're guardians. They all dive in fearlessly because they think they're the best. He tells his men to teach Karan a lesson. They leap in to attack him. He says that these guys are the crazy hunting dogs who ran wild in the north, and they were renowned slave hunters. One of the men gets hit with the right, and the other with the left. And that is all she wrote. Good night. We hear the sound of fighting continuing throughout the inn, and then we see a man fall to the floor as the leader is surprised. Karan has taken out all of his men, and the leader asks who he is. The man begins to sweat nervously, as Karan says that he's a dog man, and he's here to catch some dogs. He took an L on this one. He then punches the leader in the face, causing him to scream. And that day, the Black Star faction disappeared. Unrelated to dealing with the gang faction, there was a separate reason he was targeting the Black Star, which is the people they bought and sold like slaves, as he's here to free the demi-humans. We see a lot of cages around in a musky room, and Karan looks sad, saying that they're actually being treated like animals. And in this world, demi-humans are the target of ostracization in several ways. They are different from the ordinary. We see him unlocking their cages and letting them all out. Much to their surprise, he tells them that once they go outside, there will be a carriage provided by the Dunaleff family, and those who have come out first can go that way. We see some of them walking out, and he says that it's time to achieve his real goal. And he asks if there are siblings named Ren and Ron here. He looks over, confused, saying that they're a little small, as we see 2 children. He says that's strange. When he met them in his last life, they were in their 20s. He did hear that their bodies developed based on their mental development, but this is too much. But it'll be okay since he's already found them. He kneels close to them, calling out to them. The older sister Ren hugs her brother and begins to cry, begging Karan not to hit him. He starts to recall how she was in his past life, and that her demeanor is extremely different as he remembers her as a rough woman. That is apparently only a year from where they are now. In his last life, Ren and Ron were the villains working at the Catholic churches. I refuse to believe this is just 1 year away. They are fundamental to the church's radical demon segregation agenda. In trying to improve public opinion, they committed all kinds of atrocities, and led to the political confrontation of the first and second princesses. The 2 of them who were not easy enemies, but were killed by Park Si-hoo in his past life. He opens their cage, saying that they're different than he thought, but it's time to go. And he's saving the unfortunate villains who will develop into mid-level bosses. Ren slaps his hand away, saying to leave them alone. He tries to tell her to go obediently, he grabs onto her wrist and tells her that it's okay, and he hugs them both, saying that nobody will hurt them anymore, and that they are safe now. He says children who have never received the protection of adults, but rather their anger, will always be on edge, and that is a true tragedy. He asks their names, and of course, we already know them, and he introduces himself as Karan. They ask if he's a guardian, and he says yes. We see Ren slowly closing her eyes as she falls asleep. Same with Ron. He says that he's glad that he convinced them, but wonders if he really has to turn them over to the guardians. It jumps to a barmaid named Lenya, who is the manager of an information guild. We see that she's talking to Karan, who is lost in thought, as he wanted the older Ren and Ron. He tells Lenya to take them both to his inn for now, and give them some food. She asks if he was a philanthropist, and he tells her to think what she wants, and then he sighs, asking if he has to save Warren by himself then. Back to Merkabah City, we are at the Flying Beast landing zone in the east. We see a weird one-legged bird thing land, and a man asks to see their papers. The people quickly leap off the bird and show him a seal from the Brahme Academy. One of them introduces himself as Senior Professor Kang Ryan, and that they are his disciples, Jin Hyuk and Kang Yua. The man welcomes them for their visit and says they have a carriage waiting for them, so follow him. We hear Jin Hyuk saying that this treatment is awesome while sitting down in the carriage. Yuwa tells him the master hasn't sat down yet, and he warns her that he is not strong. Ryan asks if that is something a first-rank knight should be saying, and he tells them to stop yapping and sit down. Jin Hyuk asks if he is sure that what they are looking for is here. Ryan opens his eyes, saying yes. He is sure the chairman of this place took it, and that the emperor had guaranteed it, and their aura completely changes. Ryan tells them to hide their murderous intent, and that they need to forget all of that right now. Jin Hyuk asks how he is meant to forget that, and we see a younger version of him, terrified, asking how he could forget, as we see somebody standing atop a mountain of corpses, and that it is none other than a young Hworin. 1 month after the Typhoon Bat incident, we see the academy in preparation for the festival. Unlike the name suggests, it is more similar to a type of academy exchange war. They have an event where multiple students, of the 4 academies of each region gather and battle in their strive for mastery. Jaeger says that they should form teams soon, and Lark says no. First, they have to choose between individual, doubles, and group matches. Alicia asks Karin what he's going to compete in, and he says that they're doing the doubles and he will be with her. She seems annoyed. It seems this isn't what she wanted, and he asks what's wrong with her expression. Then she suggests they do the group match instead. He says that the group match has random team distribution, so he doesn't know, and he hopes he gets the same team as her. She keeps groaning, and he asks what's wrong with her. She says that the doubles team distribution is random as well, and just wanting to be on her team won't make it happen. He tells her that an announcement will come out soon, and if you're second rank or higher, you get the right to choose. She shoves her face into her hands, saying that he's just going to use her as a slave again, and that she's going to be forced to do labor during a fun festival. Then she suggests that he pair with Mariette instead, since she's honestly much stronger. He says that she's probably entering the individual match, as it seems she wanted the individual match prize. Her brain is smooth. Some students start chattering, telling everybody to look over. Karin sits up and hears them talking about how there are people from the east. They look out the window and see people wearing Eastern clothing. Karin says they're finally here. We learn that Ryan's nickname is the Immortal Taoist. Jin Hyuk is called the Fighting Hound, and Yuwa is the Swordmaster. And then it's time for Hworin's arc to begin. We hear Josephine saying that she refuses to transfer one of her students to Brame Academy. Ryan says they are simply making a reasonable request as the rightful blood relatives of that child, and 1 year ago they faced a tragic accident, and sadly the center of that accident was his niece. Josephine says that she knows. He continues, saying that in the chaos of their castle turning to ashes, she took his niece and they found her whereabouts, so they are naturally here to get her back. Josephine says that she is a special case, and surely he is aware of that. Ryan says that as she knows, a beast resides in her body, and he just wants to recover his niece from that beast. Josephine says that her body is only alive because of that child, and that was the will of Eryu's friend Kangyu. Ryan says that he will take care of that on his own, asking if she really thinks that she can socialize that beast in the first place. Josephine says yes, and that she spent her first semester here with no problems. He quickly asks for her to show some proof then. We see a man appear saying that he finds that there is no way that wicked demon can be socialized. His name is Li Jin Yang, and he is a bishop from the Catholic Church's group. He says who knows if this is all part of her wicked plan. Josephine tells him to stop talking. Jin Yang says that true believers do not believe in only words as evidence, and to send her out during the festival. As then, her true nature will be revealed during the heat of violence. Josephine asks if the only thing she has to do is send her out. Josephine starts to give the man a glare, saying that although their words are groundless, she has no confidence that she can convince them, since when it comes to faith, she is a witch and also a target of getting burned at the stake. But this might actually be a good opportunity. If they show how demons can socialize and have intellect, then it might be better in the future. She agrees, saying that she will suggest that she compete in the individual matches. She tells Ryan that wherever Hworin decides to stay will be decided by her herself. She doesn't know about the Eastern continent, but here her legal guardians are both Josephine and Eryu, and the Zion Cathedral's great saintess. Ryan thinks about it and doesn't say anything, but Josephine says their conversation is done now and they can leave. He thanks her for understanding, and we see her drinking her tea while letting out a sigh. She says she didn't think it would go exactly as the boy had said. Back to when Karin first woke up, we hear him telling her about the festival. She is surprised since he said that Valtazar dogs are still hidden. She asks him where and who. He says that all he knows is that something will happen. He doesn't have the details, but he has a guess. It will be the Catholic Church and Brame Academy. It will probably be one of the two or both. The answer was both. The Catholic Church, which is declining day by day, is desperate to expand its influence. Brahme Spirit Mage, along with some other students, are participating in this. The keyword is Heavenly Yaksha Hwaran. It is a very important incident that decides the fate of a named character and marks the turning point in the main scenario, as well as decides the overall direction that the entire kingdom will go. We see Karan continuing that he would like her to keep an eye on the Catholic Church. She asks what he will do. He says that there are inns constructed by the outer region. He tells her to have the Brahme students stay there as it will be easier to keep an eye on them. She asks how she can trust him. He wonders if she still thinks of him as Valtazar disciple. He starts to take his shirt off, saying that she doesn't need to continuously suspect him. While it's the right mindset to have, he shows his oath saying that he will save the world. He says that regardless of what she does, his goal is not changing. She sighs, and he says that if she knows the oath of a shadow warrior, her suspicion has to be lessened. We see that she has something to say. She says that she heard that the inns newly constructed on the outskirts were built using student investments. He tells her that is unrelated to him. She says that she has info that the owner of the inns who received those investments is him, and he tells her that it is not related. She says that she heard that recently Mariette moved her ingredients over there and is setting up a street stall. He continues to sweat nervously, saying that it is completely unrelated to him. So now he has secured 100 long-term guests. All profit-making projects were planned with this wide vision in mind, and that people would need a helping hand sometime. He glances away from Josephine, and we are taken to the preliminary round of the festival group match. Both Jaeger and Lark are sweating nervously, asking Karin if they are going to survive, as we see that out of all of these students gathered here, only 16 are going to make it through, and they start to panic, asking why there are so many people and that even seniors are participating. Karin says that only Hwaran is absent among the named characters, and he guesses she is only entering the individual match. He wonders where Alicia is and sees her getting kidnapped by the crowd. Ryan steps up on stage saying that it is nice to see everybody, and he introduces himself, saying that he is in charge of judging these trials. This is a preliminary round that will decide the 16 guardians who will compete in the match, and he wishes them the best. Jaeger has no idea who this dude is. Ryan continues saying that when their armband is ripped off, they will be eliminated, and now he will begin explaining the topic. It is the most important duty for a guardian to save the civilians. As the ground around everybody begins to shift and change, he sets up a maze using the 8-array formation. Jaeger asks how this even makes sense, and Lark says, of course, it does. Ryan is the Eastern Continent's best formation sorcerer. Jaeger says the scale is just huge and then wonders what save the civilians means. Lark points over, saying that maybe he is talking about that. We see some mannequins. After touching the civilians, you can give commands, and guiding them to your goal earns +1 for each person. Destroying them results in -2 points for each person. Jaeger says once they touch them, they will move, and then he begins doing it, saying that this is actually kind of fun. Karin watches, saying that they sure are kids getting so excited by this. We see a longhound appear, but Alicia cuts it in half very quickly. The other students start to pog out, praising her, making her turn into a little Usopp, and she tells them to just trust and follow her. We learn more about the task. By demonstrating your skills as a guardian to protect the civilians, you must transport as many stone civilians as possible to the safe zone. Alicia was feeling quite accomplished as she and some other people have gathered 10 so far. A man says he will send his familiar to scout. As they get close to one of their goals, the ground begins to shake. They hear the sound of drums beating as we see an army of civilians marching. As we hear a familiar voice saying that if you peacefully lay down your life, they will let their weapons go free. Alicia begins to sweat, asking what the hell that is, wondering if it is a trolley, but we see that they tied the stone dolls in order to make one. We see Jaeger in his rockstar phase, and he tells everybody to kneel down, saying that they are the Mandrake Bandits. Alicia asks what the hell he is doing, asking if it is okay to treat a harp like a guitar. Karin starts to laugh, saying there is no way he would play by their rules. Alicia finally recognizes it as him, and we see him with some face paint on, looking up into the sky as she calls out to him. He says he doesn't recognize that name. When calling out to him, they need to call him the Almighty Immortal. We see that he is in his Joker arc right now, saying that it is much easier to just eliminate others rather than saving everybody. He continues to laugh, and we learn that it began with 3 people, both Lark and Jaeger, of course. He absorbed the surrounding students as they came along, and the pretext was to join forces and clear the preliminary match. Since only 16 could move on, they aim to eliminate as many students as possible other than themselves. That's why they didn't look for a safe zone. Instead, they absorbed as many civilians as possible, using them as shields. We see a mage saying that they can just break them with magic, but his teammate reminds him that they'll lose points if they break them. And that is how they easily swept everybody up as Karin sat upon his throne of civilians. He starts to laugh, telling the wizard to try his best, asking him if he is scared. All these students start to call him cheap, saying that since it's come to this, they'll have to fight hand to hand, and they begin to run in, saying they can just drag them from the civilians. Lark starts to laugh, asking if he can go all out since he's been holding back, and Karin says of course. We see Lark shoot out a fireball, causing the students to get sent flying. One of them tries to remind him that there are still stone civilians with them as well, and Lark says he knows, but they're just going to steal theirs and take their points. This is the difference between them and their opponents. Compared to them who increased their numbers early and obtained the majority of the civilians, the others were slow to group up, and whenever they found a civilian, they searched for a safe zone. Honestly, rather than aiming for a must-win strategy, Karin is having the time of his life acting like this. When there were around 30 people eliminated, that's when they finally ran into Alicia, and he says that he'll give her an opportunity to join the Mandrake Bandits. She is completely puzzled, and he tells her to bring him her colleagues' armbands, then he will give her the position of vice boss. She goes to say there's no need, but he cuts her off, saying that he needs her as they are expanding their offense, and he says that anyone who brings him her armband will be accepted into the group as well, and we see the rest instantly turn on her. She's surprised, and she wasn't planning to turn on them, and they apologize, saying that rather than going against Karin, facing a semi-first rank is much easier. She calls them mean, saying that she trusted them. Karin continues to laugh, saying that the cruelty of human society, although it has the pretense of civilization during times of peace, when your own safety is at risk, everyone turns into animals trapped in corners and devour each other without hesitation. We see her after defeating them all, and she says that she didn't need any of them. We see her licking the armbands, saying that since it's come to this, she won't hold back either as she is now the new vice boss of the Mandrake Bandits. It jumps to Mariette saying that everybody else is also forming teams. Her party, which was formed on the basis of friendship, was doing great at gathering the civilians, and she was filled with the confidence that their friendship could overcome anything. That was, of course, until they ran into the Mandrake Bandits and their leader, the Immortal Locke. She calls out to Karin, and Isabel tells her not to worry as they can win. They may lack numbers, but their average rank is higher. Of course, she's already fallen for Karin, as he begins to put on an Oscar-worthy performance while crying, asking if she is going to hit him. Isabel did not catch on that their 2-year-long friendship was nothing compared to love, as Mariette shoves her staff into the air, chanting for the Immortal Locke, and she instantly starts turning on her teammates, taking them out one by one. Isabel calls out to her and realizes that it's over, as Karin and the rest cheer her on to destroy them all. We see them all on the floor, and she screams and starts chanting, calling out for the Immortal Locke as does everybody else. Karin is eating this shit up, saying that auto-hunting is actual gas. We see Ryan and Josephine watching this. Ryan asks Josephine who the Immortal Locke student is. She says that she has no idea, saying that she doesn't remember ever having a student like that from their academy, as she has already cut ties with him after seeing this performance. This is how Karin's group managed to gain a horrible image and pass the group matches with incredible results. It jumps to the doubles matches. We see the Breme twins called the Chen siblings. One of them throws some talismans towards Karin. He easily avoids them and says, "I summon you, Alicia. Use body slam." She doesn't catch on but realizes he wants her to attack, and she begins to swing her blade and instantly takes care of the 2 Chen siblings. He tells her that they easily won the match thanks to her, and she calls him an idiot, saying that she was the only one who fought. He asks what she is talking about, saying that he clearly cheered her on for moral support. Jin Hyuk and the rest watch this, and he says that he expected more since she's the Sword Emperor's granddaughter, but she's nothing special. Yua says that she gets the impression that her foundations are lacking, but more than that, she wonders what's with the Spearman student, and they both say that they can feel he is the real deal. They say that from what they've heard, he was a 5th rank knight until just now, and that the 2 hardest enemies they predicted before coming here were Berjacker along with Mariette. But that Spearman dodged the attacks of the Chen siblings like they were nothing, and that the Chen siblings aren't actually weak, as they are some of the strongest within Breme. She can feel the strength from his breathing senses and gaze, along with his experience, and Jin Hyuk says that it'll be annoying to meet him in the group match. Guys like him who use their brains shine more in group matches, and he hopes that he doesn't get in the way when they use that formation. As he looks over, he catches a glimpse of Warren going up the stairs, and he begins to release his murderous intent. The crowd begins to cheer, watching the tournament as Warren walks down the street. She says that maybe it's because everybody's out for the festival, but it feels more empty than usual, and that the silence in the space where there's usually loud noises reminds her of that day, the day that she became a yaksha. She heard a voice in her head saying to kill everybody, and this is the memory that Jin Hyuk had of her standing atop the corpses. She glances behind and sees Jin Hyuk kicking at her head. She asks if it's an ambush but says that it was actually just pure killing intent as the kick was not actually there. We see Jin Hyuk releasing his aura behind her, saying that it was impressive as most can't even sense that and collapse. She says that it makes her remember something, and we see a young Jin Hyuk coming out of a fire, saying that he is going to kill her while releasing all of his intent back then as well. She then asks him if he knows who she is, and he repeats her question in a mocking tone, saying no, he has never seen her before, and calls her sister, but in a nun sense rather than siblings. If you've watched till the end, comment, Fox, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.